You're listening to the Voice of Survival podcast. Ladies and gentlemen, your host, Nate Phillips. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the first ever Voice of Survival podcast. As the intro said, I'm your host, Nate, and I'm not going to waste a whole lot of time today with introductions. You guys know me from Journey into Comics. The Journey into Comics network is filled with my voice. This is my new podcast, and that's pretty much all I'm going to say. Now I'm going to introduce my guest at this time. So about 10 years ago, I'm going to give a little bit of a backstory here. So about 10 years ago, a little more than 10 years ago at this point, I was working in this factory, and I did not like the factory job that I was working at, and I had applied at this place called GameStop, and I said, well, shit, they're gonna hire me, and I just quit my job. I did not hear back from them for several days after I quit my job, and I called and I said, "Hi, my name's Nate, and I applied for this position, and I just want to have a job there, and I thought the interview went really well. When do you guys want me to start?" And the lady, who I think her name at the time was Kelly, answered. Right? You remember Kelly? Yeah, you're giving a gross face, but just 1 second. So Kelly was like, hold on, I'll ask the manager. And she got Liz, our now boss, on the phone, who, long story short, hires me. And I think it was on my first day that I worked there. I was like there at 9 a.m. I opened with this girl, and I had to have a drink of water. But I opened with this girl, and she did not look happy to see me. And maybe it was nothing personal, but maybe it was everything personal at that time, because I was like, a 20-year-old kid who had no idea what was going on. So I'm like, hey, what's up? I'm here to work. My name's Nate. I'm super excited. And she said, go to the fucking system lock. Get away from me. I'm going to work up here with the customers. You go in this area, and I need you to organize it. And I really, to this day, don't think you realize what kind of Pandora's box you opened with that, because it was like literal fucking Zelda. You were like, hey, here's this puzzle, this messy, fucking unorganized, awful puzzle of video game systems and rare accessories and whatnot from GameStop. And I got done. It was like I did probably worked like 4 hours, and my guest at this time, Sara, came back in the back and was like, wow, that actually looks nice. And I was like, oh my God, she gave me a compliment. And so, that's the first time I met you. And now we're in a band. If we fast forward 10 years later to this moment, we're in a band together. We've played all over this country, mostly the Midwest, kind of, but we're expanding. You came to me last year, or 2 years ago now, and said, hey, stop playing guitar and start drumming. And I have this idea. That idea turned into Walk Among Us, the only punk rock piano tribute to the Misfits. You are the architect. You're my best friend and my confidant, and someone who I've bounced countless ideas off of, as I've said before. Journey into Comics, the podcast, and then now the network, both would not have existed if it wasn't for you. So before we really get into your story, I needed to say a word of thank yous, because at the very beginning you said, hey, I think you need to try this podcasting thing, and I did, and I love it. It's one of my favorite things to do now. And then, in some sort of weird reinvention, a few short years later, you asked me to drum instead of play an instrument that I've been playing since I was 16, the guitar. And again, it's just like you've sparked, it's just like, you just like muse your way into knowing what's in my head. It's really, you're kind of witchy, in that way. But when this all started, musically speaking, for Walk Among Us, where does this idea come from? And then I think from that, I'm going to have some other things I need to ask. But really break it down for me. What happened in your mind when you're like, I'm going to play these fucking punk rock songs on my piano?
Well, let me say first that my name's Sarah.
Oh, I introduced you as Sarah.
Did you?
Yeah, I did.
Oh. I don't know what went through my head thinking about playing punk rock. I don't know. I always play music that's unexpected. That's what I like to do. I mean, the Misfits are, I don't know. Glenn Danzig just needed to be played on the piano. I think that's just what it was. I don't know. There was a lot of things going on at that time to influence the decision to make a band. And I needed a drummer more than a guitar player. As I speak about sometimes, the tonal range of the guitar and the piano tend to get in the way, or they tend to help each other. So, I don't know. I just, sometimes I just need things to happen a certain way.
Well, okay, so you asked me to be the drummer, but like I feel like where this band is now versus where we started couldn't be it's similar, but there was a whole different thing kind of going on. I mean, you did ask me to be the drummer, and your concept when you came to me was like, hey, I want to play these Misfits songs, but I don't want to have any guitar. I think I should just play it on piano. And to kind of flash back a little bit, I'm already very well aware that you're capable of this. As some people would know, you had a little bit of success, and that's whatever the fuck that word means. It doesn't matter. You had a really awesome thing happen in your life where you were in a place in your life where you were latching onto some music really hard. And you made the decision to cover a Machine Head song. And, I want you to kind of talk about that now for a minute, because that's going to kind of fill people in to where we are with this punk rock piano thing. With the Machine Head thing, I need to ask. I mean, I know the story, but I want you to tell our listeners, like, you decided to cover Darkness Within, and then a very strange string of events happens. So in arranging a song, that's like a really fucking hard song, man, that you did. So I want to know what goes through your head. How do you do it? How do you piece it together? Now, you don't have to get into the minutia, that's a little Easter egg of what you do, but let's talk about Machine Head for a minute. And when that started, you fucking, man, I remember, like, you started playing Darkness Within on piano a little bit, like it was in the beginning. What was going on then? Like, what do you do to go through a song like that?
Well, now I do things a lot differently, actually, than I did then, as far as the process is concerned. The whole idea of covering rock and pop and all of that business it actually started mostly with Jason Ellis' show, if we're going to wind back the clock to The Woodsman. That was the first one that I ever did. I had never covered a song like that before, and I guess we can talk about that a different time. You asked me about Machine Head.
No, I mean, by all means, please start with Jason Ellis' show. I don't mind. People can totally know the story. It's well worth it to know kind of your journey. Like, I mean, it's weird because I'm a passenger in the journey, so I've been just along for the ride, like, just like, wee. But now I'm starting to have my own little journey into comics. That's another Easter egg there. But for real, though, let's go back. Let's talk Jason Ellis and build to the Machine Head thing, because you're right. That is really where Walk Among Us starts in a really weird way.
No, it certainly is, because I didn't set out to become this type of an artist, I guess you could say. I don't know another word to put it as, but I mean, when I was in college, I didn't do anything like this. I wrote my own music. I wrote, orchestral, classical styled, whatever I wanted, emotional, moody. And I thought I was going to do film music, that type of thing, But then I don't know. I don't know what made me want to do that. I didn't even think about it before we left. See, as I know it's weird because we're talking together like informally, but we're not informal. But we were getting ready to go to the book signing, and we were on the way. For those that don't know, Jason Ellis came through here. What year was that? 2012? 11?
It was.
10?
It would have been
remember.
April of 2012.
2012? Okay,
Correct.
2012. Yeah, because Jason Ellis is based out in California, and we are not. We do not have means to travel or do anything like that. At the time, we didn't really. We maybe at the time a little bit better. But anyways, Jason Ellis came here. He was releasing a book about his life, and he came here to do a book signing. And we decided to just do it because I had been listening to that show since about 2009, I think was when I first started listening to that. Because I got my car in 2009. And he came here for book signing. We were on the way there, and I don't know. I just had it in the back of my head. I was like, I need to meet these people. I had felt a connection to the listeners that called into that show. Shout out to any Ellis fam that are listening to the show.
Absolutely.
But I know you guys, I don't know, you guys are out there. You know, it's the type of group that you don't speak a lot, but you know, they're just out there, you know, kind of in the wings. But I just felt like I wanted to meet some people, and they seemed like the people to meet. And I wanted to get to know about Jason Ellis. He was a very, I guess you could call him a powerful figure in radio. Jason Ellis,
I think in some ways he was
interesting.
extraordinarily inspirational in those early days. Like I think now in his career, like maybe he doesn't retrospectively know, but those early days when he was giving off crazy advice because he was hurting,
it was magical.
Real. It was so real, you know. I will never forget. There was one that he did using evil for good, you know. And I think he was talking about one of his brother's deaths or something, and it was a terrible story that he was then turning into a positive message of how he used that to become what he is now. And I fucking loved that. Like, just don't let your pain turn you dark. Let your pain push you to the light, because you can choose that for yourself. And that was a very powerful thing for me. And I remember when you introduced me to him, the first thing I ever saw was the Forrest Griffin kendo stick bit.
Yeah, that was a good one.
Man, whoa, that was crazy. So, so we go to this book signing, and we were in line. You walk in the door and buy the book immediately, and then you're in, and that's all it is.
Yeah, so we buy the book, and we're waiting in line. Just it was at a bookstore, you know. But we connected with some of the people that were out there. But I saw Tully as a co-host. I believe he's still the co-host. I can't comment on current Jason Ellis show efforts. I've since not had Sirius XM for a while, but I just went up to shake Jason Ellis's hand. I brought him a tiny koala. I remember that.
The Lego koala.
Yeah, I grabbed it off my my stand right before we left. I didn't plan that either. I just grabbed it. I thought, ooh, koala, that's cute. Let's grab that. It ended up exploding in his bag. We were watching him live. I think like maybe a few days after he had flown home, and he was looking for it, and he said, "Oh, it exploded in my bag." But them's the breaks, I guess. But so. We were just chatting after the whole signing event was over. Everybody got to say hello to Tully and them. Everybody was just standing around kind of chatting. And I was talking to Tully, I believe, at first, because they were in Death, Die at the time. And I just said, it just popped into my head. It was just kind of cooking back there. I said, what if I sent you a piano cover of The Woodsman? I said, would you guys play it on the radio? And Tully just kind of brightened up, and he looked at me and he went, well, yeah, of course we would play it on the radio. That sounds really crazy and weird. Okay. Like, it just seemed like something different, I guess, to him. And then I believe I rattled it off to Ellis as well when he was standing there. I can't remember.
Yeah, you did.
Did I speak to him about that? I think I did. But I got the green light from Tully and from them, and they were in the band, you know, and this was a very listener-driven show at the time. The whole Woodsman little... For those that don't know, the Jason Ellis Show back in the day made a C movie, possibly a B horror movie called The Woodsman that was listener created. They took all these stories, these crazy things that people were saying, calling in and getting ideas, and they kind of gathered them all together and made a script. And it's an interesting piece of cinema, if you know what I mean. But anyway, so The Woodsman, they had like this sort of the chorus is "The Woodsman is here." It's like dun 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 dun. It's kind of like this like Iron Maiden-y kind of thing going on.
Good.
Yeah, it had this little gallop to it. I don't know why I chose The Woodsman. That's just what popped in my head when we were talking in this conversation. Like I said, I didn't plan none of this like ahead of time. I didn't go to some book signing and go, oh, I think I'm going to ask this and this and this, and I'm just going to have my whole life, all the ducks in a row, as it were. I didn't plan any of it. It just was a thing that my guts told me to do in the moment. And then and here's the effed up part.
Oh, you can say fuck.
I know. I just like to say effed up.
Okay, sure. That's fine.
Because it's the vernacular, I guess.
I got you.
But the effed up part is that I had never done a piano, anything like that before, an arrangement like that. I had never tried to. I had thought about it before. You back like, I don't know, you see people on YouTube and stuff like that every once in a while. Not as much back then, because this, it really started, I think I would say the last like 3 or 4 years has really started booming with the classical musicians doing the crossover work and playing video game songs and movie songs and all of that stuff that you see on YouTube. It's increasing quite a bit, which is wonderful. There needs to be more artists out there that do that kind of thing, I think. But I had never done anything like that before. And then on the ride home, I remember we went and got some sushi, and then we got in the car and I said, what the hell did I just do? Because I'm a person of conviction and a person of my word. And if I say I'm going to do something, I do it. Now, sometimes it takes me a really long time to get things done. It just depends. But that's because I'm quite a perfectionist. I have to have things right, or I'm not going to put my name on them. I don't know why anybody would. I don't understand that mentality to just, here, I'm just going to do this thing, whatever. Like, I'm not like that, especially not with music or anything creative. Any effort that I put in is not my best effort if I am not a perfectionist about it. So I was like, what the hell did I do here? I've never done this before. And I remember at the time you and I were sort of on the outs. I don't know. We had just moved. We were still living in my parents' house. We were just crammed into my old bedroom, the one that I grew up in, like a thin wall away from my parents at the time. I think we were still sleeping on that air mattress, right?
Yeah.
And, things have graduated slightly since then. I'm no longer living at my parents' house. But that's
neither here nor there.
No, but I'm just saying that more out of memory, because I have a very visual memory, so I remember, you remember where things were placed in the room and how you do things. Whenever I do anything creative that I feel is my best effort, I remember a lot of vivid details surrounding the creation of those things. So I just remember when I was doing The Woodsman, just feeling it out. I mean, that was the key to it. I felt like there was a certain, when I listened to a song, and this goes for anything that I'm arranging, but when I'm listening to a song, I feel like there's just certain things that the listener has a gut reaction to naturally when it comes to it, whether that be the overall rhythm, it's a melody, it's a, maybe it's a funky bass line, maybe it's just, maybe it's a polyrhythmic thing, who knows? It just depends on the song. Maybe it's the melody in the vocal line that really has got the hooks. Maybe a lot of pop music is like that, where it's melody driven. But so that's how I approached it, not knowing how to arrange on piano, really. I mean, I had been to college, of course. I went to school to be, like I said, a film composer, essentially. I didn't go for film composing. I went for music composition at Columbia College, which I did get my degree in. And then I went to do postgraduate studies. There's a thing called Semester in LA that Columbia College offered. I think they still offer it for film scoring. There's a permanent lot on CBS Studios. They have like a bungalow there, and you go and study with people in Hollywood, and it was great. It was a really great experience. I got to record a little film cue at Capitol Records at the end. It was pretty sweet. That's the Capital A, where they had Frank Sinatra, the Beatles, you name it, the good one. Yeah, not the let's go all the way up to the top floor and hope we can lug our instruments up their studio. This was the bottom floor, walk through the door and you're right there. The good one, as they say. But that was an incredible experience, and that's I had all that experience behind me, but I had never done this very specific thing. Which I now know, being however many, so that was 2012. That was only 5 years ago.
Yeah, correct.
It feels like it was like at least a decade ago that I did that. That does not seem like it's only been 5 years.
No, it's only literally been 5 years. Isn't that crazy?
Well, there's been a lot of things that have happened in that 5 years. I guess
might
a lot
get into
of things.
some of those, yeah,
but. Yeah, that's how I approached it without ever having done this type of thing before. And it seemed successful. Everybody was very receptive of it. Jason Ellis was super interested. They called me, I believe, when I sent it to them. The radio show called me, and I remember being in my parents' it was like the afternoon, because the show starts, what was it on, like 2, I think it started back in the day?
2 to 6 here, 12 to 4 there.
Yeah, something to that effect. And I remember it was in the afternoon. We were just listening and waiting, and, it was nerve-wracking, because it was Sirius XM radio.
Well, the
a lot
thing,
of people
too,
listening.
that you might forget is that you sent this in like only 2 weeks after we saw them. Not
correct.
Even. You just like pow, boom, kicked it out, and it was awesome. I remember the first time I heard you play it all the way through, like complete. I was like, holy shit, that's incredible. Like it sounds like the song. What's happening here? So you churned it out really quick, but you churned it out quick enough that like. Was it like a day after your birthday or something, or 2 days after your birthday they called?
Something
and that's
like
when
that,
they played it? Because they said it was your 30th birthday.
Yeah, but it wasn't. It was
29.
My 29th birthday, yeah. Or was that for Darkness Within?
That was...
No, that was for the Wisman.
It was the Wisman.
Yeah, it was Wisman. It's like, how old am I again? When was I born? What is this?
So back at it. So back at it, we were... you were talking about being nerve-wracking, and they're going to call you.
Oh, yeah. Well, they called me when they played it. And then I don't remember what the first one they talked to me. It's still lurking out there on my SoundCloud, I think, or something. So we had somebody send us a radio clip. Who was that back in the day?
Cobra Tits.
Yeah. Cobra Tits. Who I don't know what he's up to these days. I know he's no longer active in the community. But, a lot of us are like that. But that's okay. People move on and they do things that are whatever they need to do. But yeah, we got a clip of those things. I don't remember what they talked about when they called me that time. But anyway, so it was pretty cool to have my work featured, even just a little bit. They had, I think it was on the new music segment that they had, right? And they called me on the new music segment, which usually the new music segment is not so positive. A lot of times they would find bands that clearly they were not playing because there was any sort of
ultimate troll mode.
Something like that, yeah. It was not so friendly for the bands a lot of times. But the funny thing is about that is that they weren't just like going online and picking bands and then making fun of them. People would send them their shit and say, oh, it's kind of like when people have the hashtag roast me online, like you're asking for it. Okay, you know what this segment is. You know why you're sending this in. I did not ask for it. That was where Tully placed me when I sent it. I sent him the email, and I even sent him the sheet music. I said, if you're interested in what the Woodsman looks like on sheet music, which is the absurdity. Oh, it makes me laugh. But if you're interested in what it looks like, here it is. But Yeah, so it was on the New Music Tuesday. That's right. That's what it was. New Music Tuesday.
Yep.
I knew it would come to me. It's been a while. But yeah, so it was one of those featured little things, and they gave me a call and just asked me a few questions about it and said, "Oh, you know, we only saw you a few weeks ago or whatever." Like, I think they made mention of that.
Yeah, they did.
I recall.
And then fast forwarding a little bit.
Yeah.
They had the Wolf Knives group, right? Which they still do.
It was a little later, yeah.
And it was, well, not too much later. It was within
It
was like in June at this point. It was like
yeah,
a
I
month
guess it was
after.
the same year.
So, you know, Ellis decided to start a gang. It was more a club. It was more like the people that really were in with Ellis fam at the time. I felt like the Wolf Knives stood for something, maybe.
It was just born from the stuff that they talk about on the show.
Correct.
Like everything else, it just grew out of the
Mythos,
jokes and right. That's a good way to put it. Every one of these radio shows kind of has their own little universe that they create. There's inside jokes and all kinds of stuff going on there. So yeah, it started off kind of as an inside joke, and then it just and I couldn't tell you. Don't ask me to quote what the joke was or the specific reference with the Wolf Knives.
Wolf Knives laser torch.
Wolf Knives laser torch.
Josh got it tattooed on his side.
That's right. I remember that now. I remember when they did that.
Because they were talking about it, and then somebody actually drew it and sent it to him, and they made Josh get it tattooed because he was an intern at the time.
Oh yeah.
Man, those different days for sure. And then to mention, of course, Josh also helping me get my start in podcasting.
Yeah, he was an inspiration for you. Yeah,
letting me be a part of the Josh Figures It Out podcast where we did the Incepticast. But back to you and what's going on. They called you for your Wolf Knives name. Everybody got a name. If as I remember, it was like you fucking send us your money. And then send in your information about who you are.
Yeah.
If you already have a name, put it, and we'll give you that name or whatever. Or they were going to also be calling people.
But that was just what they did. OG. They don't really do that anymore. It's kind of been watered down a little bit from what it was. But initially, it was like an initiation type thing.
Yeah.
You had to have done something cool for the show, or you had to have some reason. You had on your they had these silly little forms you had to fill out, and you had to put the reason why you deserved to have a Wolf Knives name. That wasn't something that they just handed out to everybody. And I remember they would reject people on the radio all the time. People would call in and be like, "Man, give me my Wolf Knives name, man, come on." And they would just like be like, "Tell us what you did lately," you know, and then they would click.
Yep.
Like they would kick people out all the time. They started off with the first batch of them calling people. It wasn't. They stopped doing it because it just got overwhelming after a while because it was an experiment like anything else, and it just kind of took off with people, the whole Wolf Knives thing. I mean, they didn't know if they were going to be doing it a year from then. But it was pretty cool. It was me and like 4 other people that day. I think they had like 5 people they called that day. Or maybe, I think it was like 5. Don't matter. But I was the first lady that got inducted as a Wolf Knife, fun fact. That's they call me the first lady of the Wolf Knives because of that, I guess. And also the Woods Woman, that was my name. If anybody's wondering, I have a few handles out there as the Woods Woman. If you see that, that's me. That's because I did the Woodsman on piano. Now you know.
Yeah, that's the story.
Yeah, Josh gave me my Wolf Knives name, but
it was micro pianist.
Oh yeah, Tully's idea was the micro pianist, and as much as I thought that was hilarious, I really did not want to have the moniker and a little pat and all kinds of crazy stuff that's happened and have the micro pianist attached to me for the rest of time. That just like implies like I'm going to play like a mini chord the rest of my life, like a tiny little piano.
Like a 7-key baby synth.
Yeah, and as fun as that sounds, that's a different thing.
Yeah, I don't know what that was, but so then to move forward with the Wolf Knives name, that was just a little backstory on what the Jason Ellis show was.
Yeah, I know we were getting to Machine Head.
To Machine Head, though, to fast forward like a little under a year after the book signing, we're in February of 2013 at this point, and as I had said, you've been working on the Darkness Within cover or your piano rendition, your arrangement. That's the word I was looking for.
Which also was not planned, really.
Yeah, and where does that kind of spawn from?
Well, again, whenever I get I will call it a gut full of inspiration. I feel inspiration in my guts when it happens. And I remember I was working. Where was I working at the time? I was coming home from somewhere, one of the jobs I had. I don't remember if I was still working at GameStop or not, or if this was when I had fully gone off the deep end and taken on teaching full time. But I went home that particular day, and I had just had Machine Head on. This was when I was listening. I'm not a huge fan. Little backstory here. I am not a huge fan of the digital MP3s, all of this business. When iPods and all of that stuff started to come out, I noticed a considerable loss in quality for the sound that annoyed me to this day. I don't like the sparkle. If anybody knows what that means when you're listening to an MP3 and you hear the shininess, the crackle around the edges, as it were, it's something that really bugs for me, and it has to do with what they do to compress the file. But that's a different discussion altogether. So I had at the time was still trying with these MP3 devices, and I had a Zune. I think that was my Zune at the time that I had. And it was on random. Like I used to have it, you just hit random and you shuffle all your songs, whatever, hundreds, thousands of songs you have. And that day it picked Darkness Within by Machine Head. And I was driving home, and I'll never forget it. It started when I started my journey home, and then wherever I was coming home from, it finished up right when I pulled into my parents' driveway, because we were still living at my parents' house. And I remember sitting there in the car listening to the song finish up, and I heard it in my head in the piano. I heard it all. And and you think about it, and if anybody has ever listened to Machine Head, they're a very heavy band. They're very just doom sounds to their guitars. There's a tone there. It's very heavy. And of course, Rob Flynn, very heavy on the vocals, but not at the beginning. I mean, it definitely, you can hear it at the beginning of the song. It's a very peaceful, if not tense beginning, Darkness Within. But that's not why I chose it. It kind of chose me. I don't know how else to explain that. It was a really weird sensation, the idea if anybody that's listening is a creative person and you make things on the regular, or you consider yourself an artist of any kind in any genre of things like painting or otherwise, dancing maybe, whatever you do. That's, the inspiration when it hits you. And it does feel like a sense of being chosen to do a thing, however big or small that thing is. I mean, it could be like the other day, inspiration hit me, and I sat for 6 to 7 hours drawing a picture for my band.
Yeah,
I won't say what it is yet, because I don't know if it'll be up on the internet. Yeah, but I've been making a lot of artwork again. It's been a while, but that's the inspiration when it hits you. So I was just sitting there with it in my guts, and I heard it, and I started working on it immediately. I walked down. We were living in the basement at this point. Graduated to parents' basement. You want to talk about that? Some people feel the mark of shame is living in the parents' basement. We graduated to the parents' basement. Okay.
But hey, your parents have a nice fucking basement, though.
Yeah, it's all right. It's finished. It has tiny house down there, whatever. But I remember I started working on it immediately. And this was only the second one that Did I do? I tinkered with a few more Death, Die songs. I think Awesome World I did a little improv on or something.
No, you did all of Awesome World. You did another one.
I did, but it never was finished, Awesome World. It was just at I never really finished it to my satisfaction, I guess. I never put it in concrete, and by concrete I mean sheet music. I feel like that's setting it in stone a lot of ways. You have to make certain decisions when you write it down.
I think you did Awesome World as the thank you for what happened next in all of this.
Yeah. Oh, I think it was after. It might have been after.
Yeah, because that was like your.
But this was because I don't remember doing anything between The Woodsman and the Machine Head song, because I was teaching quite heavily at this time. I was for a time there driving 2 hours back and forth during the week, teaching in two different places, teaching in Nate's hometown area down in central Illinois, and then I was teaching in Northwest Indiana as well at 2 different studios, just all week long, full time. I just was, you make it work. You just do what you have to do what you want to do, and
Well
you have
said.
to. Sometimes you have to be really reckless with your decisions about your life, and I don't mean, oh, I gotta go do a bunch of alcohol and drugs and all of that. I'm not talking about that type of reckless. I'm talking about future reckless, where you say, oh, I have this job that I could have for years that has benefits and 401k, and you just have to say, well, I got to do this other thing, and then just do it. I don't know. That's what I had to do. And I love teaching. That's a different part of music. I can talk about that another time or later, I guess.
We can talk about it in a bit, yeah.
I don't want to talk about it right now.
No worries. No worries.
But it's anyways, back to the point. Machine Head, Darkness Within. That was the second one I ever tried. And Nate, you're right. There's a lot of layers to that song. There's a lot of stuff going on. The guitar solo was pretty well crafted. And my transcription skills then are not what they are now. I've done a lot since then. And I do remember I started in the middle of that. I shouldn't say I didn't do anything between The Woodsman and Darkness Within as far as arranging is concerned, because I was arranging for my students. I was making easy piano arrangements of pop songs and, whatever, video game songs and songs from cartoons and movies and stuff. That's arranging them for kids. So making them easy versions and things, which is its own challenge. That's a different kind of challenge than the all-out, let's make it sound exactly like the song or as close as possible type of transcribing. That's a little bit different. But so this was really the second one that I tried to go all out on. That's what we'll say there. So I was getting some practice arranging for students. So my ears were getting better, but it was still something I was pretty new at the time. And I remember, and I don't have to do this anymore, but when I was trying to transcribe the guitar solo, I started, as anybody naturally would, with trying to look up some tabs online, looking for, all the variety of places where you can find free tabs and free sheets and this and that. And it's all just user-created, user-uploaded things. And a lot of times, and this is where I began to learn this lesson the most, is that a lot of times it's completely wrong. Or it's completely, because it's user submitted, you don't know if it's quote unquote fake news. Okay, you don't know if it's going to be the real thing or not until you sit down and you analyze it for what it is. You have to read between the lines when you're reading those kinds of sheets and that type of tablature and all of that. But really, all I could find was guitar tablature that had anything that was very specific as far as the notes go. And this was me trying to look to guitar players to tell me how they play their instrument. As I do with anything, when you go to school to be a composer, you learn how to try to think like the instrumentalist to best compose for the instrument. Aside from learning all the technical things about every instrument in the orchestra and learning about their ranges and all of that theoretical stuff, you learn how to empathize with the person playing the instrument and how to, you ask them how they play their instrument. So that's what I did. I approached it that way, and I would look at guitar tablature and things, and I worked out the system. Man, I don't even know if I'd have to look at my old notes, which are somewhere buried in my piles of papers back in the studio. But I'm not going to dig them out now. But I would have to look at them. I worked out a system to read the guitar tablature on my piano, so I could read it like sheet music. It's a system of intervals, I think, is what I ended up working out, just because of the way the guitar is tuned and so forth. And that got me about, I would say 75%, to be generous, of the way there when it came to transcribing the solo anyways. The rest I just had to work out with my ears and a whole lot of listens through and all of that and finagling. And unfortunately at the time I tried to bounce ideas off of previous coworkers, which I wish I would not have done, but what can you do? That's how I did it, the Darkness Within thing. And then I just it took a lot longer, and I had to play to my limits. I arranged it for myself to be able to play at the level that I was at the time. I think if I did it now and I refreshed it, it would be a lot different. I mean, not a lot different, but there would be some things that would be a little more intricate. Some of the things I would add in that I wasn't able to at the time. But knowing now what I went through with my surgery and things, which we can talk about in a little bit maybe, I had pain and things in my left hand, and eventually I had surgery for that fairly recently. It's only been almost 2 years since I had that surgery. But so I played to where I was at the time, and that's what came out, and people seem to really like it. That was a crazy thing that happened to me. I
talk
remember
about that a little bit, like just to kind of give you like a second to breathe. You made this video, and I filmed it, and I remember you were not ready for me to film it. I said, no, trust me, it's really good. Like, people need to hear this. And you're like, oh, come on, it's not that great. And I was like, no, listen, I hear it. I hear what's going on. So you did it in one take. Mm-hmm. And we put it on YouTube, but we didn't put it
we didn't put it out there.
Public.
We just put it up.
And the only way you could see it is if you had the link.
Mm-hmm.
And that, I'll let you kind of tell what happened there. But we had the link, and then go ahead.
Yeah, I felt like I was ready to record at least like what I considered to be a demo version, not like a final version, just a one pass through where I could actually play it from beginning to end and feel a sense of mastery over it. That was I felt like it was at that level. And then you recorded it, on that crappy cell phone, man.
Oh, yeah.
It was terrible quality, just awful. But we made it, and it was in my, room in my parents' basement, and just whatever clothes I had on, it wasn't like something I dressed up for, because I just was going to send it to a few people. We kept the link private, and we sent it to, the same people that we sent it to when we sent in the Woodsman. Because we sent it to...
We did not send it.
We didn't send it to them? I thought we sent it to
remember,
them. We sent it to a few Ellis fans.
You were not ready to send it, and Ellis fam got it into Ellis's hands.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, because we sent it to... Did we send it to Tim?
Yes,
and
I think so.
We sent it to Tim, and we sent it to a couple other people. I think there was just a very handful of people
that had it, yeah.
And then they convinced us to send it to the radio station, because I didn't think it was...
They sent it. We did not send it to the radio.
They didn't? They sent it, didn't they?
Yeah.
I must have forgot about that part.
Well, it was kind of all overwhelming, because what happened was they sent it without us knowing. And then said, hey, we sent it to Ellis. Ellis tweeted it that same morning. He retweeted it just once.
Yeah,
but then...
Yeah, I remember that now. Okay. Oh, it's been a while since I've talked about this with anybody.
Yeah.
I talked about it after it happened, and I probably annoyed the hell out of everybody around me, but I was super, super proud of that one, because I'd never done anything really like that intricate, and you're right. We did. I was very nervous about that. And then I felt super exposed when they told me that they had sent it to him. I remember that now. And then Ellis tweets it, and then he is personal friends with Rob Flynn. And I don't know, to a lesser extent, maybe Phil Demmel, but definitely Rob Flynn. Rob Flynn has been on the Ellis show several times as a guest in, variety of capacities. But he obviously follows Ellis on Twitter and caught wind of it. And by the time 24 hours had passed, Rob Flynn had gotten a hold of it and had tweeted it 2 separate times within an hour, I think. He tweeted it once, and then, listen to the fucking solo. And then an hour later, he tweeted it again. He's like, it brought me to tears. I had to listen to it again. He was that moved by it. And I felt moved that he was moved. It's like, you're crying, so I'm crying. Stop crying. It was one of those situations. But I will never forget that day. I woke up for work the next day, and my video in less than a day had rolled over 10,000 plays. And that was something I had never experienced before. And I broke out in hives, which is another thing I have yet to experience before or since. I was almost like livid. I don't know if that's the right word, livid. It's not the right word, because I was not upset by any means. I was very excited, but I was just full of crazy anxiety. That was more exposure than I cared to give people in my parents' basement when I was like barely in my clothes. Like I felt, I had lots of clothes on, like t-shirts and jeans, but I was one step away from pajamas is what I'm saying.
Yeah, I got
But
you.
that's it was just very humbling that happened, and I was very excited about that. And it continued to roll forward since. I mean, I still to this day get comments about that video.
28,000 now lifetime, which is
not bad.
That's cool.
It's a small victory. It's for what it is, for what it was, because it was crappy quality cell phone video of a piece that I had barely just finished. It was right out the gate. And
I mean, you didn't even touch on that Ellis played it on his show as well.
Yeah, he did.
And
yeah, he did.
And I think
he called me for that one too. The show called me and did like a tiny little mini interview and wanted to ask me about it the day that they played it, because I think it might have been another New Music Tuesday that they played it on.
Maybe
or they might have they didn't do it on New Music Tuesday for that one. They just had it on, because I remember we thought they were going to do that.
That's right.
And then they played it on a different, because Tully kept messaging me and saying, oh no, it's going to be on, we're going to do it this time or whatever. They were a little bit unorganized sometimes, not all the time, but it was a fly by the seat of your pants type of thing sometimes.
The day that Ellis got a hold of it, they played it. Whatever.
Yeah, but it was as far as within the show, because they have like 4 hours of show that they're doing.
Yeah.
Sometimes they were fly by the seat of their pants when they were going to do things.
Correct.
In
and
context. So I was just waiting and waiting,
5 our time. It was later in the day.
Yeah, again, still at my parents' house. I remember getting the phone call for that, talking about that one. That was in the basement that time, but that was pretty cool to have them call me and be interested in that. On a personal level, that was something that I wasn't trying to do for attention or for any other reason other than I wanted to do it, and I felt inspired to do it. And I guess, like, what other reason is there? What's the point of making stuff if you're just doing it for attention? I guess you'll get attention. Congratulations. Like, you'll feel a void at the end of it unless it's something that really meant something to you. So that's what it is. Yeah, that was a pretty cool time. We can talk. I don't know what else to talk about with Machine Head.
Well, you got to talk. Fast forward a little bit to.
We did get to meet them. That was cool.
Yeah, and that was a little bit more my story than yours.
Yeah, you cut your teeth there a little bit.
They were coming through Chicago, and I just in my head said, like, look, they sent out tweets about it. Their Facebook shared it. Like, the Machine Head Facebook shared it. At the time, the Machine Head's Facebook was like nearing 1 million fans or some shit. It was crazy. But they shared it, and then I was like, man, they're going to be in Chicago. I think that we need to meet these guys. Like, I think that would be a cool thing. Maybe you guys can talk, whatever. So I just was like, fuck it, I'm going to do this thing. And I just called their manager straight up.
Mm-hmm. Tour manager. Or not the tour manager. The band manager, the general manager.
Yeah, I called him and I said, hey, Sara is in Chicago. You guys are coming through Chicago. Let's meet. Let's make this happen. Like, that's what we should do. And dude got a hold of me right away.
Yeah.
And was like, Machine Head knows who Sara is. They're very aware. They would love to meet her. I'm going to give you the number of our tour manager. Call him. He'll set it up. Called him. Dude sets it up. We watch Machine Head play. And then we wait backstage. And we got to meet them. And what was that experience like for you? Because now your work, in so many words, has paid off.
Yeah.
I can't say that there is always a moment in time where somebody does an interesting rendition or cover of a song that they get to meet the person who fucking wrote the song. Not always. Sometimes the artist might tweet it out and say that's cool or whatever, but those paths never cross. So what was it like for you? I mean, I know what it was like for me. It was really surreal being in that moment because I was like both excited at meeting Machine Head and also excited watching you meet Machine Head because like you had this really cool journey with them and I was just like, what the fuck? So what was that like for you to have that kind of be where that part of the story at least ends?
Yeah, it's so that was crazy. I still feel a little bit humbled by that even happened. Was it Mayhem Fest?
Correct.
I couldn't remember Rockstar, Mayhem, all those festivals are kind of the same. So this one I guess was Mayhem. And this would have been 2013 now. We're up to 2013 because it was February 2013 when I uploaded the Machine Head video. So this was like a summer concert. It was like July of 2013. I think. Sometime in July 2013. And they set up a meeting and gave us the tour manager's phone number. The general manager gave it to Nate and said, hey, when you're there, this is who you need to contact. He'll instruct you on how to go about this thing, because this wasn't like a regular meet and greet or anything like that. This was just they wanted to plan it out so they could actually sit and talk to me, is what it sounded like at the time. Like, we didn't know what we were getting into, honestly. Like, we went there and we were just hoping that it was actually going to happen, that somebody wasn't just like playing us or just like, oh yeah, haha, you think that's you're going to get in there, whatever. And you don't know people that are, yes, sometimes they say never meet your heroes. Sometimes they say that. I'll say ahead of time, this was not one of those cases. I mean, I don't know. I don't like to use the word hero very often in context of people that I look up to, because it's just people are people, artists are artists and whatnot. But anyways, it was a little bit nerve-wracking. We had a really interesting thing happen before that. One of my students at the time, I was working at a studio that was, we won't talk about that, but at the time I was not supposed to be seeing students outside of this building, which I think is a little bit, it doesn't matter.
They have crooked practices.
It doesn't matter what I think about that.
Let's move forward, yeah.
But that's besides the point. One of my students' dads and him, young Neil as we affectionately call him, you can see pictures of this stuff online. All of this stuff, we took pictures and all that kind of thing when it happened. But his dad was taking him to that festival. He told me that day, he's like, "Oh, you're gonna go there? We totally have to meet up. I'm gonna be there." Like he told me that sometime that day, because people communicate online because this is the 21st century after all. So
correct.
I mean, come on. But anyways, so his dad hunted me down, and we were all together. My young Neil was 13 at the time, I think. Wasn't he young?
Yeah, he was 13 at the time.
Yeah, because this was 4 years ago. Okay, so he was 13. So here's me and my 13-year-old student and his dad and Nate. And this was the crew that Nate's like, "Hey, is it cool if we bring a student along too to meet Machine Head?" After Nate finally got a hold of the tour manager. I think you called him. You guys had to play phone tag for a minute, if I remember correctly.
It was a little stressful, mainly because I was contacting them while he was working with them right after they had played a show.
Right.
And think about how you feel after you play a show, Sarah.
Yeah.
These guys literally played a show, went and had some food, maybe smoked some weed. I don't know what they did. They did whatever they wanted to do. Then they got done with that, and then they went backstage, and then they got themselves together, and then they met you.
Yeah, that's how it ended up, because Nate played phone tag for a minute with the tour manager, and the guy said it was cool to have my student and his dad back there and whatever. And they did. He said, well, they'd prefer to, we're going to wait until, we didn't know if it was going to be before or after their set. Their set was, I think it was like 4 or 5 o'clock in the evening. Yeah. The Machine Head set. It wasn't dark yet when we met them. It was still daylight outside. And yeah, we saw their set, and then it was about an hour after that because he said, yeah, the guys are going to get something to eat, and then we'll have you back. And they waited to have this meeting with me. I thought that was so nice that they waited and really made it a thing, you guys. Like this was like a group of guys that was really interested in what I had to say. That's what I need to say about the members of Machine Head. And this was when Jared was still... this was his first tour with their bass player Jared. He had just gotten off of his what was his old band? Sanctity, right? Yeah, Sanctity. That was his old band, and he had just been adopted. I remember when they were doing the audition videos for their new bass player after he left. And Jared got it, and that was his first tour with them. And I remember we were both just so excited together when I met Jared, because he's like, oh, it's so awesome that I'm playing with Machine Head. I'm like, oh, it's so awesome that I'm like talking to y'all and you all are Machine Head and you're playing and blah, 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 blah. And I just remember it was a very exciting conversation. I talked to Jared for a long time after that, but they spent about an hour with us talking to us and chatting. I mean, they didn't go, I need you to think about this, okay? Like, you heard me tell the story, right? This is like the second thing of any legitimacy that I had ever done in my life. I felt fresh out of college still, even though I was several years out. I graduated in 2006 from college. So I was a few years out, quite a few from college, and I still felt like it was a little bit fresh out of there. But here's how I need you to think about that through those eyes, because here's me, 5'4.5" roughly, standing there with all four members of Machine Head in the semicircle around me, hanging on my words. I mean, they were talking. Nate was witness to this, as was my student and his dad. I had Phil Demmel look me in the face and go, "How did you pick out all those notes? They were exactly right." And I went, and I just pointed at my ears, and I said, "I did it like that." I mean, the guitar tablature I had mentioned before helped me only to a certain extent, and even then, after I did that, I ended up going back and changing a lot of things. It was like not what y'all are thinking as far as notation goes. There was a lot that went into that, and now I do everything 100% with my ears. I don't use anything at all as far as looking online, looking up tabs or anything, looking up chords. I don't do any of that. I do everything with my ears now. But that's what experience gets you. You know, you can't start somewhere without starting wherever you're at. And that's where I was at. Yep. But I will never forget that. I talked about ragtime music with Phil Demmel. That was wonderful. I thought that was great because at the time I was still competing in a ragtime festival every now and again. And so I don't know, because they were asking me about what kind of music I played and stuff like that. They were like, basically all of them just asking me questions and interested in my background, interested in a variety of things, you know. And they weren't seeming to feign interest. There wasn't like one member of them that was just like, oh, this is stupid and I don't want to be here, you know. Like nobody was forcing them to meet with us, is my point. It was very natural and very much like, hey, you're fucking awesome and we want to spend a little bit of time with you because you did this awesome thing. You know, that's really what it felt like, I swear. And it was just a very, as Nate said, surreal thing to have happen. When it's one thing to meet people that are in a band, that are famous or whatever, that have done a incredible amount of significant things. It's one thing to buy a meet and greet package and shake their hand. It's another thing to meet them on the street, say, "Oh, I'm a huge fan. Let's grab a drink and you can sign something for me." You know, without any I mean, that's like meeting a stranger, going on a blind date, something like that. This wasn't like that. This felt very personal. This felt like something that I don't know, I knew at the time it was going to stick with me for a while, but I had never had people I guess of that stature, you could say, show me that kind of respect as a musician. That's really what came across to me. I mean, I'm sitting here and I'm talking to Rob Flynn about I'm just giggling about this because I'm talking to him about his song and about all of the chords and the rhythms and the structure, you know, all the things that you study when you study a piece of music. At least what I study a lot of things. And he's just looking at me and he's smiling And then he gets this grin on his face, and he's done, and he's like, you know, what you said made sense to me, but I just play the happy and the sad notes. And that's what I know. And I just had this moment where in my head I was just like almost giggling, not like laughing at somebody, but just like giggling to myself, because I thought, I have studied this song more than the people that wrote it to do the thing that I needed to do. That, not like placing fault on these people, because that's just how it is.
Just write the song.
Yeah. When you write a song, and this is in my experience when I write songs or when I write music of any kind, you just do the thing. You don't think about it in the same analytical way as somebody on the outside looking in who's trying to figure out what you did. That's what I did, was solving this puzzle. That's really what arranging is just solving a series of puzzles, and then you just work the puzzle. That's how it feels to me. You have like raw material in the song that you grab from, the rhythms and the notes and blah 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 blah, blah, whatever it is that you're grabbing onto as a listener, and then you just work the puzzle. And that's how I do when I'm arranging. But that's that was a super powerful moment. And then to be able get back to this too, to not only be able to share that with Nate, to be able to share that with my student and with his dad. And they were so nice to them, asking about, you know, oh, you're learning piano, that's awesome, you know, blah blah blah. Like, they were talking to Neil, and you know, signed a bunch of stuff. I didn't have them sign anything that day. I wasn't interested in that.
Not at all.
Not that I didn't want their autograph. That's not like how I feel about it, but it was such a gesture of kindness from them to have us backstage in that capacity, to just invite us into their space that way. That was super nice. So I didn't want to take advantage of that. That wasn't my MO, and it's still not. You know, that's that's just one of those things. But my student got he actually was inspired. We told him, because he had not been to a ton of festivals. He had been to a lot of concerts at that point, but not in the way how we go to concerts. And we were telling him, like, dude, a lot of these people just wandering around are in bands, man. Like, go ask for their autograph. So he had this pair of khaki pants on, and he was running around the festival asking people for their autographs. And he had signatures all over these pants, now including Machine Head signatures all over his pants, you know?
Yeah, I think he has a dude who was on Sons of Anarchy, who was also in some other band.
A lot of random people, like, and he wasn't afraid.
He was literally walking up to people with backstage passes and going, "Are you in a band?" And if they were like, yeah, he'd be like, "Can you just sign my pants? Like, I'm just trying to get as many signatures as possible." Like, he hustled the fuck out of that.
Oh, heck yeah, he did. It was awesome to watch. But yeah, so that was an incredible day that I feel just happened. It happened. I don't know what else to say about it, but I'm very grateful that it did.
Well, and then it was only 2 short years after that. And I know that's really a weird gap of time to think about, but from 2013 to 2015, only 2 years. You, to kind of go back to the beginning question here, you started Walk Among Us. Mm-hmm. We kind of know now why you do these songs, how you do them. We know about your arranging ability, and you've just explained to everyone, like, what you do now is second nature, essentially. Mm-hmm, so tell me, let's talk about why the Misfits. This is, I think, a question that you have never in your 2 podcasts history. Obviously, one of those was like, we did a holiday bullshit episode with Cards Against Humanity that you were on. And then, you were on the Metal Experience podcast. Right.
Oh yeah.
And actually, technically, third, I forgot we were also on Fiendcast.
Oh yeah.
We did the Fiendcast interview. So,
of course.
So this is your 4th time being on the on a show.
Yeah.
And I think that this is a question that you've never got to really answer, like how you maybe wanted to, or I don't know, maybe that's not the right verbiage, but why the Misfits? With everything else that happened, you talk about Death That Die, you talk about Machine Head. This was really your next big venture, and I need to know, why the Misfits?
Well, there's a complicated question within that question.
It's not complicated. You can break it down as full
as
you like.
Well, I'm going to.
Cool.
I'm just saying that the answer is not as simple as, this is a cool band that I like, guys, and I thought that it would be cool. It's kind of tangled up in my journey and in a lot of things. I mean, I used to really be into punk rock. You know, it had a lot to do with my high school years. Some of the material that was chosen at the beginning of our journey as a band versus now. A lot of that had to do with, to kind of talk about it on a more, I guess, psychological, deeper level. It had to do with reconciling a person inside of me that's kind of no longer there, because everybody becomes different people at different points in their journeys. And for me, I've been lots of different people, just as everybody else. I mean, you're always you. Everybody's always themselves, but you reinvent yourself and you don't even realize you do it. And it happens. It's just the process of growing up and maturing as a human species, I guess, as a human specimen. You just, you change and you grow. And I had this high school girl inside of me, without touching on anything really dark. I was in what I would describe as a cult within my church when I was growing up. I'm okay to say that. And I had a lot of very, weird religious stuff. It was very, very restrictive, my upbringing, I guess you could say, in some ways, and in some ways not. But it was very religious, to say the least. And punk rock was my way of dealing with all of the other crazy rules and, just insane dogma, I guess you could call it, the dogma that was placed upon me as a teenager, when I wanted to be breaking free and becoming an adult and becoming who I was supposed to be. I was caged up. And I was put in a little, when I say caged up, I mean inside my mind. I was caged up.
Maybe to care to elaborate for you a little bit here. But, you were put in a position where all of your actions, right or wrong, were constantly judged.
Correct. It was a situation where every part of my personal life and... there was a hierarchy within my youth group. That's how I should put it when I use the C word, the cult word. It wasn't defined as such. There's no finger to point at it. It was the person that was running this youth group at the time that I was going through. It had this discipleship program that was like a hierarchical type thing. There was like an inner group within the group within the group, and it was effed up. That's how I'm going to say it. It was very, I remember I was in this group for almost 4 years. I didn't feel like it was a choice. And when people ask me why didn't I leave, I just say I didn't feel like it was something that I could choose. I didn't think like that was an option for me. I thought if I chose that I was going to burn in an eternal hellfire. And that's true. That I really felt that was true. And when you have conviction about something as a passionate person, as I am, you get wrapped up in that. And so I lived a dual life. I felt like I had a fake person that I put on during those years. That was the Jesus person that I wore this face. And on the other side, I was screaming and I needed out. And I listened to punk rock and thrashy music. I loved angry, real, raw music that was expression of people that not necessarily knew how to play their instruments. They weren't virtuosos. They weren't the classical musicians. I grew up a ballerina, and I was a nerdy, Coke-bottled glasses kid with braces that played the clarinet before I ever touched a piano. I had my toe shoes. I would dance in ballet, and I was very Christian and uptight and things. And even though I loved things like Beavis and Butthead and that type of 90s stuff, the raunchy things. My mom watched Howard Stern every night, by the way.
Question.
Those types of things. But there was like this duality,
Yeah, but you're almost talking about the beginning of your journey, so we might as well kind of dip there.
Well, the question is relevant.
Yeah, absolutely.
The Misfits question is relevant to this because this is why, of all the bands, I've played every kind of music I can think of. I'm not a master of every kind of music by no means. I've got the mountain that is capital music with a capital M in front of me. I have my ever-growing book pile of composers and, whatnot, all these books that I have, everything. I work on it every day. Every kind of music. I mean, Nate can attest to this. He's here all the time. We live together. And he hears me play anything and everything. I talked about, not to reference what I just said, but I talked about metal and ragtime in the same conversation. It's all the same thing to me. It's not, on the surface, it doesn't sound the same, but when you get down to the roots of how music ticks, it all ticks the same way, with this all the same heartbeat behind it. It's just the faces that get put on it, that all have genres and things. It's all that's where preference and whatever. I'm not going to get into that discussion, but this discussion of my early life is relevant to the Misfits because I had, as some people would say, unfortunately, some people would say this is awesome, but I didn't feel comfortable having Glenn Danzig's records in my house because of the religious thing, because of, I loved that music. I listened to it with my friends all the time, Glenn Danzig's Misfits and all of that, and I loved it. That was our road trip music. But I never had it in my house because I didn't feel, I didn't want it to get taken away. It was one of those bands that I felt was special to me and my friends and all of that. And so I didn't have it. I don't know. It was a different time. People weren't downloading music or anything. This was the late 90s. So everybody had CDs and some people still had tapes and stuff, but I had CDs. But I did, as I was to get back to say, maybe unfortunately for you, maybe not, have the Graves era of Misfits as which, it's a different band. Personal opinion here, just my check mark. I've always said that those bands, I didn't even connect them together, to be honest with you, for a long time. I thought it was a different band entirely, that was just using the Misfits name because I was dumb. I was in high school. Everybody's dumb when they're in high school. They don't know no better.
Yeah.
And I was like the oldest kid in my family. I didn't have any older cousins or older brothers or sisters or nothing like that. I didn't have anybody to look up to tell me that's not really what it is. So I had this album, particularly Famous Monsters. It was better than American Psycho to me, but I had both of them because it was allowed in my house. It was all right to play, It wasn't something that I got questioned about as much. And fast forward, it's because you look at the lyrics and it's like, okay, well, some people said they made this way more accessible, and of course they did. But for somebody like me who was stuck in this very place of duality, we'll call it, one foot in the kingdom of God and the other foot, burning in hell. That's how I feel about it. It's a sensation of feeling like you're constantly being ripped in two. That's how it feels when you have a fake persona, as it were, that you feel you have to put on for people. And a lot of people feel that anyways in their day-to-day, things like depression and stuff like that can make you feel that way, where you feel like you have to put on a different skin and then you can get out of your skin at the end. But I never got out of mine. Mine started to fuse to me like I was some sort of crustacean, this creature that I got fused to this shell, and I didn't know how to get out of my own shell, as it were. That's kind of what religion did to me and took from me in a lot of ways. But I learned from it. I learned from from those religious experiences. But back to the Misfits. So I had that in my house, and I grew an affinity for that, those albums, I guess. So that's ended up where I ended up starting. When we first started the band, I was trying to reconcile with this person, this teenager that didn't get to be a teenager in a lot of ways. I had a lot of experiences I didn't have, that it especially was evident to me when I started teaching. I've been teaching for over 10 years, but I don't know, about 10 years now. It's been longer than that though, because I taught all through college too. So it's maybe been more closer to 13 that I have experience, but that's besides the point. It's always been there. Oh, excuse me. And when I started teaching, it became very evident to me when I saw teenagers that would grow up. I would get kids that would be, 10, 11 years old or what have you, 12 years old. And I would watch them go through middle school and high school as normal functioning kids. And they would have experiences that I didn't have universally, like I would see, because kids, when you teach piano lessons or any type of private lessons, you become kind of a mentor, teacher, sort of friend, confidant. It's not like you just, like a class you go to and then, we're doing piano and then you leave. Like that's not how it was for me. That's not how I am as a teacher. I mean, so I would watch these kids grow up, and I knew that I didn't have the same, at least in mentally speaking, did not have the same experiences as my students that I was watching. And, you come to terms with that. And I think that that's why I chose to do the album that we did when we first started. I needed, not to make a pun, but to make a pun, I needed to put this girl in a grave. So
okay, totally.
I felt like if I didn't start, and also let me say this too. And I didn't mention this. When we started the band, I was in physical therapy. I thought I had nerve damage in my hand and my arms. I was having EKGs and stuff like that done, going to the doctor, and they sent me to physical therapy because they did not know what was wrong with my left wrist. I had been in pain for decade. I mean, I'd been in pain since I started college. They told me, I had some quack doctor tell me that I had carpal tunnel syndrome when I was 18 years old, and that's why I switched to music composition. I was at a Bible college, if you can believe that. That's a time I'll just mention it. I went to Bible college for 2 years, and I thought my only option in life was to be a music minister. I thought that was it. And that was something I've since rejected, and I've moved on from that. Of course, I'm doing what I'm doing now, but that's where I came from, and that's real. That's where I came from, and that's why I felt if I did not do this part of it, because there is you say why the Misfits? There are plenty of other punk bands I listened to at the time. I was a big fan of TSOL, big fan of The Damned, big fan of Adolescence, and some of the skate punk bands at the time, Circle Jerks, and
AFI.
Yeah, I was a big fan of them up through what do you call it? Not Black Sails, the other one.
Sing the Sorrow.
Well, Sing the Sorrow is the one that I don't know if I ever warmed up to it how I wanted to. Like I did and I didn't. It was really Art of Drowning. I mean, that late 90s sound that they had, which, to tell you the truth, Davey Havok's vocals aside, it was just something in that stuff. But yeah, AFI, I liked Shut Your Mouth, Open Your Eyes best. That was I think my favorite one. It was very raw, that album. Say what you will about the style of that music. AFI was a band that it's hard to say that you like that, whether you like that band or not. They've been through a lot of reinventions. They started off as a new school punk band, and then it was the Shut Your Mouth, Open Your Eyes was thrashier, much thrashier than the poppier previous records. And then they had Black Sails, Art of Drowning, Fire Inside EP, and those were more like, they were like punk rock mixed with, I don't know, almost late 80s like stadium rock. It was kind of this mixture of these things, very epic and goth and things, but whatever, that's besides the point. So I was a fan of things that I was a fan of. To me, what was real to me is what I liked. But the Misfits, Glenn Danzig is just an enigma, I have always been fascinated with Glenn Danzig. For as long as I can remember ever being introduced and hearing about him, and back in the days before people were constantly on the internet all the time, there was just this lore about Glenn Danzig. He was just so mysterious, You'd watch those tapes. I'm sure some of you have seen some of the old school tapes, the VHS things that are out there, and you see all the background footage and stuff. I mean, it's easy to see now because it's all on YouTube. If you want to learn about Glenn Danzig, you can get lost in the interviews for several days. I think I've listened to about every interview with Glenn Danzig that is up there on YouTube. I've gone through days of this before because he just I've always admired the fact that he just doesn't take anybody's shit. He just is who he is, and he's an artist, and he makes his statement, and you have to deal with it. I mean, that's literally it. He draws a line in the sand, and he says, you like this or you hate this. I don't care. This is what I'm doing. And I really admire that about Glenn Danzig. And music aside, but the reason musically that I wanted to choose this music, and I'm going to get away from talking about the early part of the band, the Graves era part of the band. That part has been reconciled. I think we all needed to start there. But this is what I was going to say about the surgery. I remember now. The reason I brought up the surgery was also we chose Graves era album first. I did. Because I, aside from the reconciliation part, I wanted to make sure that I didn't screw up Danzig's music. You guys, I was really in a lot of pain. What ended up happening, this is a good segue into talking a little bit about this. So this would have been the summer of 2015 that I started going to physical therapy for a completely unrelated issue to my knowledge. I didn't know what was wrong with me. They didn't know. So we were just doing exercises, all your typical physical therapy stuff to strengthen my hands and arms and wrists and things. And one day in the middle of my physical therapy, I got startled in the middle of the night and I jumped out of bed. I don't remember what it was. I think Nate had some kind of bad dream or something. Something happened and I jumped up out of bed and I did one of those things where you jump up with your palms. You push yourself up with your palms. And I heard a snap in my left wrist. And I flicked the light on. And there was a massive lump sticking out the top of my wrist. And I went, what the hell is that? And I was getting up to go to physical therapy the next day. So I was like, well, I guess this is a new thing to talk about with my physical therapist, huh? And I went there and he took one look at it and he goes, oh, that wasn't there before. And I went, uh-huh. So I told him what happened and he went, well, you need to make an appointment with your doctor. That looks like it could be a cyst. And I said, really? And I said, well, could this have been there for a while? And he went, those things are tricky. It could have been there for a really long time and you just didn't know. They'll have to do some x-rays and talk to you about your history and things to really find out. But they said that I needed to go in. So I went and got it checked out. Went and found a surgeon, the whole nines. And they ended up having to do surgery because that's all that you can do. I had a ganglion cyst, if you know what that is. A ganglion cyst, you have a little, they call them sacs, little reservoirs, I guess you could say, at the end of your tendons, your tendon sheaths. And they can fill with fluid. And when they do that, they form a cyst. So everybody could technically have a ganglion cyst. A lot of people listening have probably met people or have had them in their lifetime. They just pop up. There's nothing that causes them. They're just, sometimes it can be damage from a fall. I mean, there's things that can exacerbate them forming, as any cyst can happen. But that's something now, some people get them and it doesn't bother them. I had a lot of people contact me afterwards that said, I get them and I smash them with a book. People say that, and I'm like, no, I'm a pianist and a musician. Thank you. I am not going to smash my hand with a book. That's not what I'm doing today. But so I had this thing and a lot of people were telling me that it didn't bother them. Oh, my aunt had it, didn't bother her. Well, after I had it out, I was talking to the surgeon in my post-op. It was 2 days after I had the surgery, I think. So they let you, go home and rest for a minute, and then you go back and they look at it. And he told me that, my surgery was only supposed to last 10 minutes. They were going to literally go in, shoop, shoop, take a little cut, take the thing out, because that's the only way that you can get rid of these things. If you smash them, they just swell back up. Your body will, and they'll get worse. You have to have them surgically removed for them to be gone. And even then, they say you have a small chance of them returning, but it's unlikely for that to happen. But he said it took this the 10-minute surgery turned into almost an hour. It was about 50 minutes and some change, I think, something like that. And he told me that it was like an iceberg. He said he had to move my nerves out of the way because this thing had probably been in there. And when he was talking to me about my history, he goes, yeah, you could have had this thing for probably a decade or more and not even known, because it was that far inside my wrist. It didn't visibly show up symptoms until something knocked it just right, getting out of the bed, for it to pop up and say, hey, I'm here, take me out. So I lived from the time I was 18 until 2 years ago, or 2 to 3 years ago, thinking that I had carpal tunnel syndrome. I slept in braces on my wrists every night, those carpal tunnel wrist braces. And I didn't even need to do that. I had a cyst the whole time that was there, and it was causing me a lot of pain. I was wondering why all of my effort wasn't making me get better. I just thought I wasn't good enough, the whole thing you can think of when you go through and, you feel like you have limitations. I thought my hands were too small. I mean, you name it. I just didn't know. I just thought my left hand sucked, to put in the bottom line. I just thought it's like I was born with a crappy little hand. To quote Cards Against Humanity, I had a crappy little hand, and that was the way it was. And it was not so. And I got this cyst taken out, and it changed my life. I got to train an entirely new hand. But it was under those conditions, y'all, that I formed my band. It was right. I mean, this was maybe 3 months before that sucker popped up. Correct. That I decided to have a band. Not even, maybe 2 months. Because it popped up, it was in the fall, and we formed the band in the summer, right?
No, I think it formed in November. Like, your thing came up in November.
Well, no, I had to schedule the surgery a couple months in advance, though.
That's right.
It was right, because I was really disappointed.
October from September, so it had only been a month.
I had to play because the whole reason we formed this band, I thought we were just going to do this one-off show. I was trying to kind of like reconcile myself, do something different. Nobody was playing this Graves material. I know it's controversial. I know it's not everybody's cup of tea. And,
well, I think it's controversial because of him as a person, not because of the music.
Correct. I'm not a huge fan.
Yeah, absolutely.
I've watched a lot of, I do my research. It's not something that I take lightly. But it's something that if you know about the Misfits controversy, Michael Graves is the usurper of Glenn Danzig's throne, as it were. That's how a lot of people see it, and in a lot of ways they're correct. I mean, I personally feel they should have just had a different band name altogether when they formed that version of the Misfits, as we have to call it, because that's what they did. But that's that wasn't any of our decisions. That just was a thing that happened. But it was happenstance that music led me to the music of Danzig, and I'm fascinated with his music. It's simple, and it's clean, and it's consistent, and it's hooky, and it's full of woes. It's got all the good stuff in it, and there's not a single. They've got 52 songs in the Misfits catalog. Hang on.
Oh, sorry.
53 if you count Rat Fink, which was not a Misfits song, it was a cover.
Correct.
So 53 songs, and anybody that is a Misfits fan will listen to any one of those 53 songs and they're going to like that song. I can't think of a single song out of that 53 that I go, man, that's really like one of the worst songs I've ever heard. No, they're all catchy and great. Like, some of them are better than others, just as in anybody's catalog. You can rank them from 1 to 53 if you really want to. That's, I'm not saying like everything the man touches is gold, because that's certainly not the case. I'm a Danzig 1 through 4, and then we're done for a lot of it. But I haven't really listened to not then we're done, but I'm just alluding to the fact that Danzig 1 through 4 is the cream of the crop there.
Oh, absolutely.
And including the Misfits catalog, of course. But, that's, it seemed, I wanted to get that out of the way before we made way for Danzig. And I'm so glad that we did, because when we started playing Danzig's material, Danzig's Misfits, it was like magic. It just like felt so different, it was like so fresh and new after doing all that other stuff. It's like they say you got to cut your teeth as a new band, and you really, really do. And, you don't want to do a disservice to Glenn Danzig. You just don't want to. So I had a cyst. I had all of these things going on, and that's what it was. And I got the cyst removed, and we had to take a little time off because I had to heal up. I couldn't play for several months properly. It took a long time. I was stupid and tried to do a ragtime competition in the middle of healing. That was not my forte. Not my shining moment. My hand wasn't ready, and it caused a lot of anxiety for me, and I didn't do so hot my last run at the competition. I prepared, and I had some good selections and everything, but then after that, it was just the band full force. After that would have been the summer of 2016 that we really started swinging, and we decided we were going to perform that Famous Monsters album, right? 2016. We had prepared it. And we were just going to do it. We weren't even going to be like the tribute to the Misfits thing. Like that just kind of like happened after we started playing for so long. We were just going to do like a Halloween weekend thing. And yeah, right? Yeah.
Well, yeah, what kind of happened is that we talked about it, and it was like, okay, we were going to book this Halloween show. We'll play Halloween. We'll do the entire Famous Monsters album. It'll be cool. And we were still working on it. We kind of had to take the break because of your surgery.
Yeah.
From your surgery, the Mississippi trip happens. We're on the other side of summer, and we're gearing up towards. I mean, at this point, Walk Among Us has no online presence at all. We're not.
No. Yeah.
We're not. I mean, we do have the names for all of our like Walk Among Us band consistently. We secured those before anything, but we had no real intent to do this music thing, and then an opportunity kind of came up, and I was like, guys, I think we're ready to just do a show. We need to play a show. And I remember that it just came down the pipeline. The Ataris are playing not too far from us. They're a pop punk band, sure, but with any punk anything, the Misfits will go over well. So I just messaged this promoter in the Shot in the Dark, and I said, hey, I want this opportunity. And he said, sure, but it's a pay to play, which,
yeah, you do it. Do what you got to do. But
our first pay to play, we sold like an F ton of tickets, and we did really well and had a really nice show. And we started the show with some Graves, but we ended the show with some Danzig, which I thought was cool.
Well, you always save you got to keep the best stuff at the end there. It was all an experiment. That's a good way to think about it.
Well, and then once we within the first few days had 100 and some followers on Instagram, people were really interested in what we were doing. And I think that steam, and not to tangent away from, our story or your story, but
it's relevant.
The Instagram growing as it has or whatever has really been the driving force behind this band. Because I think that number drove me to be like, well, fuck, there are other people around the place that want to see us, people all over the United States and whatever. We have to bring up our A game, and I think that's what kind of informed the quality that we're bringing now, and how things are now. But go ahead and continue your thought. I'm so sorry.
Oh, you don't have to apologize. You're fine. It's I don't know. It's a weird thing. The Misfits, right? It's just good stuff. It seemed to translate to piano really well too once it finally happened. It was a little rocky to start, anytime you're doing something new, it can be a little bit new, I guess. You don't know what you're going to come up with. I didn't think that that I was going to be able to get enough power out of that keyboard. I'm still not satisfied. My ultimate, should I say my ultimate goal, or should I save it?
I mean, I don't know.
Well,
I don't know which ultimate goal you're talking about. We talk about a lot of goals.
I want a real piano.
Oh, well, fuck yeah, of course you want a fucking grand piano.
Yeah, I want the juxtaposition of a real piano, a grand piano, preferably, but not necessarily just anything with hammers and strings. I would love the juxtaposition of that. I love the absurdity of it, of thinking about that. and then smashing out old punk rock tunes. It's just, I just like giggle thinking about it. I love it. I think it's something that in the punk scene, there's not a lot of bands that play the piano consistently. Some bands do, like TSOL. They had a piano player, The Damned. I mean, I've already mentioned those two bands, but what can I say? I like bands that have keyboard players sometimes.
Well, I mean,
it's kind of obvious.
Territory, right?
Yeah, it comes with the territory, but it's you don't see it on the regular, which not my motivation for wanting to be in a punk band, as I've explained in detail. It's my roots. I just love this music. I love this music, and I wanted there to be a place for me. And I'm not a guitar player, and I'm not a drummer. I'm a piano player. I'm not even I could be if I wanted to, but I'm not a keyboard player. I don't go up and play the keys, as it were.
You don't play the synth side.
I don't play the synth side of it, and that's fun to compose with. That's fun to do. I'm not saying anything to the detriment of that. I think that keys are fantastic. I just listened yesterday to Emerson, Lake and Palmer. Just yesterday, they did their first. I don't want to say that it was their first, not their first album, but one of the first things they did as a band was play Pictures in an Exhibition, which is by a classical composer called Modest Mussorgsky, who wrote it originally for piano, and then later it was arranged by Maurice Ravel for orchestra. And that's the one that most people know about, is the orchestra version, but originally it was for piano. I've studied it to death. It's one of my favorite things. But but as you know, Keith Emerson, crazy keys player. I mean, my God, he like rented a Moog synthesizer on the regular, like old school. Those instruments weren't cheap then, and they're not cheap now.
Wow.
But they just fabulous player, But that's not my path. I'm a piano player. I like Jerry Lee Lewis. I like Sun Records style of playing. I like that. I don't know how to explain that, but I think that they said that Jerry Lee Lewis played the guitar on the piano. That's how people would describe him. They'd say that he played like Chuck Berry. Yeah, they'd say, man, did you hear this cat over at Sun Studio? He's playing like Chuck Berry, but he's playing a piano. And that's fascinating to me. Speaking of a man that did whatever the hell he wanted, I seem to have a trend here with the types of people that I like and admire, I guess, to a certain degree. I mean, that guy did whatever the hell he wanted. He abused the piano in more ways than I think anybody ever has. I've seen performances where Jerry Lee Lewis has done everything just short of walking off stage, grabbing an axe, and basically chopping the thing up on stage in front of everybody. I mean, he sits on it, he hits it with his shoes, he stands up and jumps up and down and stomps on the lid. Every version of slapping it, throwing it. I saw one video of him in like the mid 80s, and he pulled off the entire, and I guess this was a regular thing because I've seen him a couple of times do it, where he pulled off the whole front part of the piano that covers up like where they where the lid is, where you shut it over the keys, the key cover, that's what you call it, the key cover, the part that has the key cover and the whole nines with the music rack and stuff. He starts tugging at it, and then tugging a little harder, and tug, and then he just ripped the whole sucker off of there and just chucked it off to the side of the stage, and then continued to beat the hell out of the piano. I mean, this guy did whatever he wanted to do and continues to this day to make no apologies for it. I mean, that's fantastic. That belongs in punk rock. That's like that's the essence of it, man. That's just to do whatever the fuck you want.
Yeah, now my thing is, you're talking about Jerry Lee Lewis.
Yeah.
That kind of forces me to kind of go back to the story a little bit. When we went to the ragtime competition last May, on our way back, we stopped at Sun Studios.
Oh, yeah.
And you got to do something that's very awesome in my mind. You got to play a piano that Jerry Lee Lewis played and burnt a hole in with his cigarette.
Cigar.
With his cigar in Sun Studios.
Yeah, that was a lot. That was, we had never taken the Sun Studio tour. I had never been to Memphis. We made a special trip to drive up through Memphis when we were coming home. The competition was in Mississippi. So we were driving from Mississippi up to our Chicago area, so just to give you an idea of what we were doing. But we stopped at Sun Studio in Memphis, and it was one of the, well, it was the best thing that happened to me that weekend, but it was something that has stuck with me for a very long time. One of these days, someday, I will record some music in that space, because it is like as they say, there's something about that space. There's something in those walls. They have the original panels up there that they used back when Elvis and Carl Perkins and all those dudes, Johnny Cash, all of them. They have the original sound panels that are up on the walls. I mean, they say that, to use cheesy colloquialisms, they say, oh, if the walls could talk, if the walls had ears and could talk and had a voice, or whatever. But it's true. You go into Sun Studio, and there's a little gift shop when you first walk in, and you can get a Coke, and you can buy a t-shirt and a keychain and all that stuff. But then you go upstairs, and it gets immediately claustrophobic when you get up there. It's rickety and it's old, and you get up there, and they've got like the upstairs of it, because it's just 2 levels, and the upstairs they have done up like a museum now, where they have the original recording board, and they've got the original radio communications board, I guess you could call it, whatever that was. And they had a bunch of memorabilia and things like that, and they take you on the tour. Our tour guide was wonderful. I remember his name was Nick, I think.
Yep, Nick.
Yeah, he was great. I believe we made Facebook friends after that.
Yeah, for sure.
Because I see his status updates now and again. But yeah, he was fantastic tour guide. I was very impressed with him. He was very. His delivery was very. What's the word I'm looking for? Confident, I guess. He just knew what he was talking about.
He was like a preacher in church, man.
He was very passionate about what he did, and I appreciated that. That was because you don't want to go to a place like Sun Studio and have somebody that go, oh yeah, this is where so and so did this and so did this and blah blah blah. Like, you want to have somebody that actually appreciates what happened in that space.
Absolutely.
And he did, and they take you through they had take them in like groups of like 20. I think people.
Yeah, they gotta have tops. A max, because that upstairs is like, it used to be Roy Orbison's apartment.
Yeah, they said that he used to sleep on the floor up there.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh yeah, sir, where you're standing right now, that's where Roy Orbison used to sleep every night when he was doing his recording and stuff. That used to be where a lot of the musicians that went to record there would stay, in that upstairs part. It was like an apartment type of place, but it's not really an apartment. It was just a room. It's like an attic almost. But it's anyways, they played. It was a little bit spooky when you go up there. You kind of get that, like, you're in church vibe, where you don't want to move and you don't want to say anything. You're kind of just like waiting for something to happen, or like kind of like when you go to like a cemetery and you're trying to, ooh, is something spooky going to happen? Oh, I felt a cold chill, like, ooh, like that type of anticipation. Not because somebody told you to, like, everybody just did it. It was super weird, like, because you go up the stairs and everybody's talking, oh, ha, ta, 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 and then as soon as everybody gets up there, it's like, and it, like, the vacuum just, it's like you get sucked into it. So they play a lot of old music and things, and then they take you down to the studio, which is currently in use. People still go there and record. You have to do it during the evening because they have the tours. They do recording overnight, I guess, because we talked to this Nick Cat about it afterwards, what it costs, and when you can record and stuff. And you can if you got the funds and things, you can go and record music at Sun Studio in that space, man. But you go in there, and immediately I see a piano, and it's an old beat-up Wurlitzer, and I went, there's some history in that piano. There has to be, because they had it set up by the $1 Million Quartet photo. If y'all are familiar with the $1 Million Quartet photo, that's where Elvis is sitting at the piano. Was Elvis, Jerry Lee, Johnny Cash, and is it Roy Orbison in that picture? Who else is in that picture?
Is it Carl Perkins?
Carl Perkins, I think.
It's Carl Perkins.
I think it's Carl Perkins. But anyways, that's the $1 Million Quartet picture. Very famous picture of them at the piano. And I don't think it was that piano, but it was very similar in style to that piano. But they had it setting up on the wall, like, in such a way that it, like, was like with this picture. It was pretty cool. They had the microphone that Elvis sang into, no longer working, but they let people pose and take pictures with it. And it's pretty cool. They've got X's on the floor in like tape where certain events happened that were of significance. So they have an X on the floor right where Elvis stood to record his first single when he was 19. They had another X on the floor where was the other ones? There was like 3 different X's on the floor that the tour guide went over.
There was one where Johnny Cash did something.
Yeah, where he like recorded his first guitar tune there or something like that.
Yeah, and then they had the control room X. And
yeah, the control room one. But that's besides the point. So we go through this tour, and it's very, aside from interesting, it's just like there's just an energy in that place. That shit's real. People talk about that have been to Sun Studio.
I experienced it.
And it's one of those things that you just go, and it's some people say it's because you have anticipation of something and all of that, but it's not quite like that. Like, you go in and you immediately, when you leave the building, it's like there's a change in the air. I don't know how to explain it. Like that, the walls in there just vibrate with energy. This like I
mean, they've sucked up all of the songs like that have been made history. I mean,
yeah.
The modern American music movement and rock and roll started there.
Yeah, a lot of things happen there, you know?
And I mean, the walls, you said it, they vibrate. You feel it in there. It was really weird because I remember that day, and we were packing up to leave Mississippi, and Veronica said something to the effect of like, we should do the Sun Studios tour. And I was like, sure. I don't know what that is, but okay. Like,
yeah, we didn't even know they were going to be open.
I was not really well versed. You guys called. They're open. We drove in. We did. Did we do Sun Studios after we ate, or did we do that first?
We did that last. Went to Jerry the King Lawler's barbecue.
Yeah.
You got to meet the king.
Sat in the king's chair.
Yeah.
That's a joke on Journey to Comics.
Oh, yeah. I'm sure you've already.
Because I fucked up and said it's supposed to be a throne. I said king's chair.
Yeah.
But so Brandon was like, "Oh, you want to go watch Game of King's Chair later?"
Wow.
So
okay.
But anyways, yeah, we met King and we ate at his restaurant, and that was cool. Went to Sun Studios, and I was not anticipating anything. I just thought it would be cool to go through this tour. Mm-hmm. Like, oh yay, neat! It's interesting, right? By the time I left there, Sarah, I was in tears. You can attest. I had
he had like
a life-changing
religious experience there,
it really was.
I've seen that happen. Well, again, grew up in religion.
Yeah.
That was a bona fide moment of finding the Lord that you saw there. That's
Except for it wasn't the fucking Lord. It was rock and roll music, you know.
But that's some that's some religious stuff right there. But it's true. That place has has something about it. There's a something in the air there. But after the tour was done, Nate, I didn't know he was going to do this, but he went and asked the tour guide if it was cool if I tinkled on the piano a little bit, tinkered around with it a little bit. And he's like, "Oh yeah, that's cool. Just give you." And he gave me, I think he said, you can have like 2 or 3 minutes or whatever to sit and play a song or two. So I sit down, and I think I played that Geisha Wiley ballad that I was working on.
Yeah.
Oh, excuse me. I had been working on this extremely strange, spooky old blues song that I had arranged. I didn't get to play it for this competition. It was it was in rounds, 2 songs, 2 songs, 2 songs. If you didn't advance, you didn't get to play the songs you had prepared. So this was one of the unprepared songs. So I was playing around with that, and the tour guide came up to me and he said, "Oh, that's really cool. Like that's like this groovy song. It sounds good. We don't have a lot of piano players that come through here that play on that," he said. And he said, he started telling me about the piano at that point after I'd played it a little bit, because I had noticed on the left-hand side of the piano on the keys, in between 2 of the keys, there was a giant hole that had been taken out. Clearly a cigar burn. You could see the little, kind of burn marks around that hole. And, cigar and cigarette burns are pretty obvious when you see them.
Yeah.
You know what they are. But I didn't say nothing about it. And he said, he said last time Jerry, he just looked at me in the face as I'm, playing this keys. He's like, yeah, last time Jerry Lee was here, he got pissed off about something and he put a cigar out on the keys and walked off. And I just looked at him like, what? What are you telling me right now? And then I played something else, one of my little ragtime tunes. I think we took a little video, if I'm not mistaken. And as I was playing, I was just in my mind, I was like, okay, if all this weird like energy stuff is real at this moment, if this is all the thing, I just tried to the best of my weird, like, third eye ability, psychic ability, to just suck the energy out of that piano. Like, I wanted to, like, suck whatever spirit Jerry Lee Lewis left in Sun Studio in this instrument, in these strings, in these hammers. Whenever his fingers touched it, I just wanted to suck it out of this piano that day. So I just played little, whatever I had prepared off the top of my head, and it was good. There was a couple of people who were like, man, you're really good. It's like, thanks. I was just failing at a competition, y'all. I'm here to, do something different. But yeah, that was a really great experience. I was so grateful to that tour guide for being so gracious and allowing me to play that piano. That's another thing that I think I will carry with me. That's a good one. That's a good one. Yeah,
absolutely.
But that's
now
I forgot why we were talking about that. We got there.
We were talking about the Misfits and why you picked the Misfits.
And
that kind of all encompasses. And you were just talking about how Jerry Lee is like the punk rock of piano before punk rock piano existed. And I want to touch on that now. In kind of the flip is that when the Misfits started, there wasn't guitar. These songs were played on organ. Out of
circumstance,
really. Circumstance and necessity, correct. Glenn was trying to maybe have something a little closer to the Doors at that time. When you listen to the original Cough Cool and the original She recording, they definitely have more of that vibe, but they weren't trying to be the Doors, obviously.
No, it could be the electric piano, too, that gives it that flavor.
Well, talking on that, really, you're the creator of punk rock piano, because we played the Misfits songs on your piano.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't really even remember how this all came about. You told Veronica she needed to play essentially what is an archetype for the original Misfits. Did you want to get into that a little bit and like kind of how where your headspace was there?
Yeah, well, when you think about the way a band is set up, traditionally you've got 4 instruments. You got guitar, bass, drums, and a vocalist, or possibly a second guitar,
that sings,
that also sings, But I mean, that's when you think a band, that's usually what's going to come to mind. Now, when you take away the guitar, which, like I said, it was a musical decision to take away the guitar. It wasn't because I don't like guitars, because there's plenty of music clearly that I like that has quite a bit of guitar playing in it. I appreciate good, balanced guitar playing. I will say that. But that's all I will say about it. I wanted to recreate, when you take away the guitar, I'll get back to that. I'm sorry, I got scatterbrained for a second. When you take away the guitar, it leaves a void of noise. I don't know how else to explain that, because guitars are notoriously noisy. I mean, when you consider you flick on the amp and you have white noise already before you even touch the instrument. And then you get the instrument anywhere near or a microphone pointing towards said amp and you get feedback. And you get all kinds of other stuff. You hit any, if you have distortion on the guitar, all you have to do is tap that electric guitar string. You don't even have to pluck it or nothing. You just tap it barely and you'll get a noise out of it. It's just noise that needs to be controlled. And the thing about it is when you have so much noise like that, it's just like a shotgun splatter against the wall and it just sounds like that, That's where the dirty piano comes in. It's because when you take away the guitar, a lot of it, you take away that essence. A lot of punk rock needs that noise. It needs that grit to it. It needs that unpolished thing that is so great about it. I love that. I love people that are just banging on their instruments and they only know a handful of chords, but they're just doing it with all they got. Like, that is like one of the greatest things to me. I love that. Like, I giggle about it because there's so much happening in such a little thing. That's a different conversation altogether. That's a more philosophical conversation. But the noise is essential in a lot of this genre of music. Not so much when you get into I'm going to call them the branches of this tree, and the branches being all of the pop punk and all of the post punk and all of the whatever happened in the 90s punk, like that, all of that unfortunately, because I came of age in the, mid to late 90s, I was afflicted, we'll call it afflicted, with a lot of the things that happened in the 90s. I was not fortunate enough to be a part of the 77 scene, man. Okay, I was born in 83. That was, I'm unfortunately mixed in with millennials and all of this when I'm kind of on the cusp of a different thing, but that's also a different discussion for another day. So the noise needed to be there because the piano was too clean. And it's too cheesy to just take it and go, oh, well, I could just put a layer on my keyboard, and like layer the piano. No, I wanted to sound like a piano player because I'm a piano player. Like, just because somebody hasn't done it doesn't mean that you can't do it. That's what's so frustrating to me about the scene sometimes. And I'm not just talking the punk scene. I'm talking about, like, we've played with death metal bands. I mean, straight up. Yep. I got worried for my hearing when we were done, metal bands, and I've been to a lot of shows. Okay, there was a lot of unregulated screaming and noise and things. Like, I mean, we've played in a lot of different places, and I've been, being from a classical background and going through I've listened to every genre of music, like there's a scene that surrounds almost every genre. Some is a little bit more passionate than others as far as the scene that follows, particular bands or styles, but there's always a scene there. And the problem with musicians in the scene is that there's just one way to do things. There's an expectation. Everybody, and just ask the sound guys. Ask if you want to know more about that, just ask the sound guys, because they have a certain way that they set up their boards for a certain setup of band that they expect is going to happen. Maybe they're going to add, some horns if you get really funky, or your synthesizers and keys. Those are easy to just patch in. Ain't nobody have straight up piano. And I shouldn't say nobody. There's bands out there that play piano. I'm not speaking to that. There's bands that are in the punk and metal scenes that have piano in them that's playing, maybe not every song, but there's nothing led by a piano. And that's where I learned to lead musically, was on the piano. And that's my instrument. And I felt like I loved punk rock, and it was a source of solace for me during times when I was stuck in that, I was stuck as a teenager, just so stuck. I don't know how else to explain that. I'm inside my mind stuck, and it was a source of, getting it out for me. And at the same time, I was always on the outside looking in, because I was a musician and I was a trained one, and I loved this music, and I didn't come at it as a trained musician wanting to make something better. Do you know what I mean? I'm not like trying to, there's a thing in the punk scene, especially amongst old school adherents, old school punk, that they almost poo-poo on people who are trained musicians. You're overqualified. Do you know that I've been kicked out of bands for being overqualified?
Yeah, they were stupid.
Well, that's a true thing. I've been in bands since I've been about 16, in and out of bands, and I've been kicked out for being overqualified, or just for knowing what chords I'm playing. Like, and I say, what chord are you playing, guitar player A or guitar player B? And they go, I don't know, that one. And then I go, okay, and I try to break it down, and I say, play me the lowest thing that you're playing. Play me the lowest string. And they don't even know what I'm saying. And then I get kicked out for being overqualified. It's these little things. But that was a true story.
Yeah.
I'm not saying names to protect the innocent. But that's that was a true thing that happened a long time ago. But that's No, I don't remember what I was talking about.
You were talking about the dirty piano.
Oh, the dirty piano.
We were talking about the
noise.
Of the noise.
Yes. Well, that was very long-winded way to say that we needed some noise on top of that clean piano that I really, really need to play. It's that clean piano. So that's where Veronica and the dirty piano came in. We started to experiment with small keyboards. We don't have a lot of funds to work with. I'm just saying that out of necessity. We have the instruments that we have, and we work with what we have because we are do-it-yourself people. All the podcast stuff that we do, that I should say that Nate does, I guess he calls me the producer or whatever he considers me.
You kind of are a producer because, as I said, I bounce off ideas to you. I bounce ideas off of you so often with the podcast, with where we're going, with what the network is going to do, and with the band stuff and everything. And so yes, in some ways this is your venture as well. It's just that you're not a very large voice in all of this.
Yeah, well, I tend to stay on the down low. I mean, I don't this was, as you know, slightly uncomfortable for me to talk about all of these things today.
Yeah, but it's been great so far. I mean,
okay, that's good. I don't open up that easily, but we needed the noise to get back to that, the little piano. So we have the instruments that we have, and Veronica had this little, your standard Yamaha 61 key, just your basic little keyboard that people have at their houses. And I said, why don't we take this thing and do what the guitar players do and just hook up a stinking pedal to it and play with the tones. So she borrowed and ended up keeping, actually, but initially borrowed from one of her family members this pedal board. I don't know what it is. You can say it's a Boss something.
Yeah, it's a Boss ME50, I think.
Yeah, it's pretty standard. It's not, and again, working with the equipment that we have on hand. So we used this pedal because it's what we had and hooked it up through the little keyboard and just found a sound that was the appropriate level of trash. And that's exactly what we needed.
Well said.
And there's something about trashy music. I don't know. I love the sass. I love the sass of Sassy Misfits, Glenn Danzig.
Yeah.
Anyways, I had to say that out loud again.
Well, no, we were talking about the Misfits and Glenn Danzig, so it's perfect.
I know. His chord changes, all of it. It's just sassy, catchy. I love it. But I digress. So that was, we were going for that old school fuzz. And yes, it was a product of circumstance in the 70s. A lot of the quality of those recordings was not intentional, of course, but that's what we got. That's what we got handed down through the decades to us as listeners on these tunes, and that's what we're going to get, because as far as we can tell, unless you were at Riot Fest, Denver, or Chicago, which Nate and I were at Chicago Riot Fest and Veronica saw the Misfits, unless you were at those two shows, as far as we can tell, since Doyle likes to troll everybody and try to say that they're going to have shows, I don't think that the Misfits are going to play another show together. Well, this is what we got. They're certainly not going to make any more records or re-record any of this old material. So what we have of the 77 to 83 Misfits is what we have. And that's the sound that we all know and love if you're a Misfits fan at all. I know a lot of people don't like punk rock. I get this sometimes too, which is funny. A lot of people that don't like punk rock like our band. Like some people that aren't even into it, they're like, well, we hear that a lot. Like, I wasn't a fan of the Misfits, and then I heard your band, and now I'm going to go listen to the Misfits. And we direct them, of course, to which Misfits to listen to and all of those things. Yeah. But that's so we've kind of become little what would you call it? We proselytize a little bit for the old school Misfits.
Yeah.
The 77 to 83 style, I guess. We've become a little bit turning people on to them, but it's in a good way. I feel like that music to me, because I am a piano player, I hear a lot of things in piano. We feel like when we play this music that it shows people what, or I should say, I'm trying to show people what I hear. That's what I was trying to get to. I'm trying to show people what I hear when I listen to a punk rock band like that, or when I listen to metal or anything. But specifically with the Misfits, since that's where we've chosen to start our band, it's I want people to hear what I hear. And that's what I hear. You have to hear through a lot of that noise. And once you round out those tones on the piano, and you can hear the chord changes differently. And that changes the way. And we play all of the songs in the same keys. We don't transpose anything to different keys. It's all the original album keys. It's all original length of the song. I mean, we don't, add an extra chorus here or play it this way here. We try to stay true, at least I do when I'm playing, I try to stay true to what the Misfits are doing while at the same, or what they did, I should say, while at the same time playing the piano on it. But I like to take the approach of, again, Jerry Lee Lewis, where he plays it like it's a guitar, because you can do that. I mean, it's hammers and strings after all, technically not the digital instruments, but it emulates it, get the idea.
It's funny because, to go back to the Machine Head thing, like you conceptualize that as a piano solo, and then this is like the next step of where you take that.
This is easier
with this sound. It's much easier because the song are all definitely not as let's say intricate as it were. But there's a lot of there's a lot of really cool intricacies that are deep in that music. And like you said, it's almost you're like almost like this is probably a bad analogy, like a paleontologist that's brushing the dirt away for people to see the bones that are really there.
Yeah, that's a good analogy. I like that. And it just has to do really with the quality of the recordings in the end. Now, some people would say that it has to do with the guitar playing itself. There's a lot of people that have some very strong opinions about the guitar players that have been in the old Misfits band.
But you got to think that all those old recordings are done in minimal amounts of time with little to no money at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And for what they are, they've withstood the test of time.
I agree. A good song is a good song, and a good writer is a good writer, and Glenn Danzig writes good songs, hands down. And I mean, I didn't even mean for this to happen, because our Sun Studio trip happened before we were really deep into into Danzig's material. It happened, and I learned after that. I mean, I had heard that there was some connection to Glenn Danzig and Sun Studio, but I wasn't sure at the time much about it, because it was too, you don't think about that kind of stuff on the regular. It just comes up when it comes up. But I thought about that in the back of my head when we were there. I was like, I think Glenn Danzig wrote a song for somebody here or something. It was two people, because I knew about Johnny Cash. Don't get me wrong, I knew he wrote a song for Johnny Cash, but I did not know about Roy Orbison until I started listening to the interviews. And like I said, I've listened to damn near every interview that's been on YouTube. Because do yourself a favor and listen to Glenn Danzig's interviews sometimes. He calls out journalists. He doesn't take crap from people, and the things that he doesn't take crap about are worthy of not taking crap about.
Totally.
That's what gets me. I like that. But so that's he's got that connection there to Sun Studio. But I forgot why I was talking about that again. But
we were just
chatting,
wrapping all of the different talking about Glenn as a person and everything, and the not having a lot of money to record songs and whatnot. You're spending a very minimal amount of time.
Oh, and they stood the test of time. That's what you said.
And they really did. And it's weird because in the same year we were in Sun Studios was the same year, and maybe the only year the Misfits reunited for, as you said, 2 shows.
Oh, that was
we got to be a part of going to the Riot Fest in Chicago, and crazy, whole all of that stuff. But way earlier in our conversation, I want to jump on this real quick. Way back in the conversation, you were talking about being a nerdy ballerina, Coke bottle glassed, clarinet playing girl.
Yeah.
And I need to know, where does music start for you? Because we know all these awesome things that you've done. You've accomplished a lot of really cool things. You've played, I'm saying this by proxy because I don't get to experience quite like you experience, but we've played some pretty cool shows where you're blowing people's minds with piano, and people are thrashing around to your piano, and people are singing along to, even though they're Misfits songs, they're re-envisioned essentially. and presented in a different way. And we're making people who don't like the Misfits or didn't know about the Misfits like and know about the Misfits and then what we're doing is we're also servicing Misfits fans. So we kind of know that about you. But I want to go to the start of all this. As a little kid, what was the first instrument you played? Did you get put in piano lessons? Stuff like that. Like how do we even get to you being a piano player? Because I feel like you said you were a clarinet player.
Correct.
And all that.
Correct. I was. I actually didn't. I subscribe to this. I did not first learn music through playing an instrument. Actually, I learned, as you said, as you quoted me saying, I suppose. I first learned music through ballet. Ballet was my first love, and I still love it. It was something I had to give up because I became a woman. That's what happens. In case you were wondering, that stereotype is real. When you start to grow curves, you don't get to do it anymore, or you don't get to do it the same way. There's definitely a stigma in that world about having the ideal body type, and it's not without reason. When you dance on point, it's very, very, very stressful on your joints and your feet. And I mean, you think about it, you grow some tits. I mean, you could have 10 pounds of extra weight. Think about like the fulcrum point of your foot when you're on point and where all of that energy of your entire body is being directed right onto the top of your ankle and sometimes to your very tippy toes. I mean, when you're up on point, but at least the top of your ankle when you're dancing ballet. So every extra little bit feels like it's 10 times heavier when you're dancing on point. So that ended that one, but that was the first thing I ever worked hard for, was my toe shoes. I did that when I was when did I get them? I think I was in fourth or fifth grade. Fourth grade.
It's like 9.
Yeah, 9 or 10 when I got them. And I remember my grandpa had built me a ballet bar because he was a woodworker, as you know. We've got all this wood in the garage and things. He built the room in my house. The back whole half of our house is my studio now that I teach lessons out of, and I teach and we have our band practices and things back there. But my grandpa built that whole thing by himself just because he taught himself how to be a woodworker. So putting up a ballet bar was a very simple task for him, and he built me a pretty good one. It was sturdy, and I had a tape player. This was before CDs and things, because this would have been like late 80s, early 90s, and early 90s. So I had a tape of Chopin, and I had a tape of Mozart and of Beethoven, and I had some tapes of just compilations of classical music, all piano, because that's what we did. My ballet teacher had a record player actually that she would put on certain classical scores and things. It was all classical music that we did our routines to, and that's where I learned about how to listen to Chopin. I remember I would listen to Chopin while I was doing my ballet stretches, and I did it every day when I was a kid. After school, I would go down there. I barely remember doing homework. That's the funny thing about schooling. Like, I remember everything else, but I was a straight A student, so I did my homework, but I don't remember doing my homework.
Totally.
I just it was done and I got A's on it, so whatever. But I remember coming home from school, and I would do my ballet, and then I would play video games. That was the other thing. That's the other big part of my life. I've always played video games. It's always played. That's another discussion.
We could have a whole other 2-hour discussion.
We could have a whole podcast about video games, and I could talk about that.
We could do that.
That's what I did when I was a kid. So I learned about classical music through dancing to it and intense listening. It's meditative. I mean, the deep stretching and the things that ballet does to your body is just incomparable to anything else. So it's that's where it started. And when I was in fourth grade, so about the same time that I was on this journey to getting my toe shoes, they did the rounds in the school where they would introduce the band instruments and the orchestra instruments and all of that stuff. And for some godforsaken reason, I decided I needed to play the clarinet. I think when I look back on it, that was more my parents' choice than mine, because that's the cheapest of the woodwinds. Oboes are notoriously expensive, for instance. The reeds alone for an oboe, because technically they're supposed to be handmade, the reeds, but the reeds alone, the double reeded instruments for an oboe, $20 and up. I mean, that's the cheap end, $20 for a reed. And you can go through reeds like nothing. They're just reeds. They're made out of bamboo and string and cork. So you go through them pretty quickly. They take some wear and tear. So it's clarinet was not as expensive as those other things. And I remember we rented one from the school. And that was the first instrument I ever played. And my band director, I played it for about a year, and I played it while I had my braces, mind you. This is when I had my braces, and I would play it for hours. I mean, hours. This clarinet, I would go in my room and play until my embouchure. Your embouchure is your muscle that's around your mouth that you smile with. You know that one. Until it failed me from muscle fatigue. I would play and play until air was blowing out the sides of my mouth. If anybody's ever played a woodwind instrument of any kind, you know what I'm talking about. You can get fatigue in your embouchure, and then you just can't do it anymore. Like, there's just air blowing out the sides of your mouth. Your muscles aren't going to work. You got to recoup and do it again the next day. But I didn't know about that or care about it. I played the clarinet, and I liked it, and I liked playing music. I don't remember learning how to read music. I remember it just always making sense to me. We had essential elements books in band class. Those are your standard go-to. And I barely remember playing out of them. I remember I got the first one, and I just I went through it on my own. I remember going through it like in my bedroom, just like playing all the way to the end. I don't even think our class got all the way to the end of that book, but I played through the whole darn thing. Like, I would just play through all of it, and then I would try to figure out my own melodies. That was the first time I ever tried to figure something out on my instrument. And nobody told me to do it. I was just in my room one day, and I was a kid, and Aladdin had just come out, and we had seen it in the theater, and I was obsessed with A Whole New World. Oh my gosh, everybody loved the music in that movie, but that was the one that for some reason I decided to pick out on my clarinet. And I didn't even have staff paper. I made my own out of pen. I sat and drew like staff with a pen, and I wrote the notes down for A Whole New World, and I found it like years later. I dug it up out of my found my clarinet music. You know, it just gets stashed away at parents' houses or wherever your kid stuff goes when it goes. And I ran across it, and I would say a good 90% of it was correct. There was
wow.
I was shocked myself. I was like, that's okay, that's a little spooky, but because I just remember doing it again, going back to what I mentioned earlier about being very hyper aware when I'm creating something.
Correct.
I felt it then too when I remember every bit of sitting down and making that staff paper, and I just remember everything about it. So that was my first instrument, was the clarinet, and I got very good at it. I thought I was very in love with it, and after about a year, my parents couldn't afford it anymore. They couldn't afford renting it, and I was going to have to quit. And my mom went and told the band teacher that we couldn't afford the clarinet. We couldn't afford to buy one. I had 2 younger siblings at the time. My mom had just had my sister she was still very, very young. And she told him I was going to have to quit. And the band teacher at the time, and I still to this day attribute the fact that I'm still a musician to this man, my music teacher. His name was Mr. Shear. I don't remember his first name at the moment. But he told my mom that I was not going to quit band, and that I was going to rent an instrument from the school for free, and because he said that it would be a travesty, as he told my mom, if I quit, that I needed to be in music. And when I was, so the next year, so that was in 5th grade, actually, because in 4th grade they introduce the instruments. 5th grade you start them. So 5th and 6th grade. So this would have been 5th grade I was finishing up. That was my first year. Mm-hmm. So then 6th grade rolls around, and they put me in the middle school band, which our middle school was only 7th and 8th grade. It wasn't 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. Some middle schools have all 3 grade levels. Ours did not. 6th grade was the last year that you were in elementary school. So I stayed in band for free that whole year as a 6th grader, and I got I think they gave me 5th or 6th chair in the middle school band when I was in 6th grade, and all these girls were so mad. I remember there was these 8th grade girls that were just particularly mean to me because I was better than them. From what my band teacher, this was just my band teacher talking to me, because I would go talk to him and be like, these girls are really mean. I don't know if I want to do this, And he'd say, no, you're you're farther than where they're at now and you're younger than them, just deal with it, whatever. But I stayed in band long enough to find the piano. When I was, so I was a pretty late bloomer. I did not take piano lessons when I was 4 or 5. I was not one of those people. I did not have fancy teachers or anything of that nature. I mean, I had Jack Hansen was my favorite teacher that I had. I can talk about him another time, but I
mean, you don't have to talk about him another time. If you got some stuff to
well,
say, feel free.
If it comes up here, but I first we got a piano. The one that I have now, the Wurlitzer that I have now, was my mom's piano, which she does not play the piano. She was forced, I guess, to take piano lessons and took for like 3 years, and then it wasn't really for her, It was just one of those situations which I've encountered time and time again being a teacher. I understand why that happens, but it just wasn't for her. And my grandparents had this piano, and they saw that I was a musician. They didn't want it anymore, and they brought it over to our house. And that's when I found my mom's old piano books, which was an old, like John Thompson series and it's from like I think those were published in like 1937. But anyways, so I found this piano book, and I taught myself how to read bass clef out of it, because you only read treble clef as a clarinet player. So I taught myself how to read bass clef, and before you know it, I was playing piano. I don't remember honestly how it happened. We got this piano, and I was 11. Well, how old are you in 6th grade? 11 or 12? 12.
Oh, 6th grade.
I was almost 12,
yeah,
I think, because
pretty close to 12.
I turned 12. I was a late. Everybody was older than me. I was on the younger side, so I turned 12 right before the summer after my 6th grade year. So I was 11 when we got that piano, and it took my mom until I was almost 13 to put me in lessons, even because I'll never forget the day I was playing, and I taught myself all this stuff out of this John Thompson book. I would play my friends' piano music. They did not like that very much. When I would go to their houses and play out of their piano books, they'd be like, "Hey, you don't even take piano lessons. Why are you playing out of my book?" Like, well, because you asked me to play out of it, They would be like, "Let's play piano," thinking they were gonna. I don't know. I don't know what they were thinking, but they did not like that when I was a kid. But it's yeah. So I was almost. I'll never forget this. My mom came up to me when I was practicing this particular piece of music one day, and she said, "Ugh, it took me 3 years of lessons to learn how to play that. How are you even doing that?" Like, she was like almost concerned sounding about it, and I was just like, I don't know, I'm just playing it. And then she's like, maybe you need to take piano lessons. Like, it took like a year and a half of her witnessing me teach myself at this instrument. This piano was in our living room, and as Nate knows, our house is not that big that I grew up in. Like, that was the whole house in this one living room. You could hear it all over the house. It wasn't just, oh, she was in a different room this whole time. No, if you were in the house or in the immediate vicinity outside the house, you heard me banging on this piano. So that's how it started, and I was almost 13 when I started taking lessons, and it was just a local teacher at a studio. Her name was Alicia Novak, and she was still one of my favorite people. I've lost touch with her. I don't know where she's at right now, or what she's up to, but she was my first piano teacher, and I learned a lot from her. She was just a very nice lady. She was a hippie. She was a 90s hippie, but she didn't have air conditioning in her house and stuff like that. She was very like that. But she ended up giving me away, actually. She would test me with music that was very difficult, and she ended up throwing the Pathétique at me, which is a Beethoven piano sonata. I believe it's Opus 13 Pathétique, but I could be wrong about that. But I'm pretty sure it's 13, the Pathétique. And I couldn't play it perfectly by any means. This is why I thought I had carpal tunnel in my left hand, because of the Pathétique sonata. If anybody knows, it's got these octaves, these tremolo. They're not really tremolo, but they're eighth note, very, very in the left hand, and it's very taxing on the left hand. So I thought I just beat myself up. No, it was a cyst, but still, that was what it was. But I could understand it, and I demonstrated a competency enough to where my teacher with tears. Another moment I will never forget, because I didn't understand why she was so upset. She told my mom that she couldn't teach me anymore. She said, I can't teach her. She's going to pass me up. You need to give her to somebody else. And she gave my mom some names, and I went on to a different teacher. At that point, I had only been with my teacher for maybe a year and some change, and she gave me away. And I didn't want to go with anybody else, but I did. And then I went to this horrible woman that I guess since I don't like her, I won't name her. But it is the fair way to do it.
Isn't that the fair way to do it? You just,
correct.
give them
Why we gotta focus on the negativity, whatever. So I didn't like the person she gave me away to, and we ended up through a series of asking people and searching to somebody else after her. So I stayed with this woman enough to have a really awkward recital in her basement, and then I was done after that. And I found Mr. Hansen after that, Jack Hansen. He was a really fine piano player. He played for the Lyric for a while, and he was a concert pianist in the 60s. 60s, 70s, whatever, all the way on up through. And he was old when I met him. I mean, he was in his 60s when he was teaching me, and maybe approaching 70. I don't think he was quite that old, but he learned from Mr. Hansen was a student of one of Debussy's students. He learned in Paris. That's where he first, as he says, got the bug for piano playing. He went over, and I believe it was, no, I'm not going to say the name. I was going to say Nadia Boulanger, but I can't remember. I believe that was her name. No, it was either her or Marguerite Long. I can't remember which one now. Don't quote me on either of those, but one of those two people was his teacher in France, this person was a student of Debussy's. So Debussy was a classical composer, and as they say, they describe him as an impressionistic composer, but that's besides the point. Very famous composer. His most famous tune is Clair de Lune, if you've heard of that before. But so I felt really comfortable learning from Mr. Hansen, because he had a connection to the past that has since to be replicated. He was a different kind of musician. He just was, looked like he was falling apart, and he would sit up at that piano and just gold. It was beautiful. It would sing. I've never heard anybody play like that before, or I hadn't up till that point. He introduced me to all kinds of 20th century music. His favorite was Alberto Ginastera. Ginastera was a Brazilian composer, wrote very strange music. Some of it was what you call polytonal, where both hands are in different keys. So like one hand would have no sharps and flats, and the other would have like 5 flats or something, and be all in the black keys. So you'd be playing in 2 different keys at once. Things like that. Very interesting rhythms. A lot of where prog rock came from. Inspired by composers like that who were composing in those days. Very strange music, but I loved it. It was good. So that's and then on from there, I went to the Bible college, and I went to after that. Had a series of teachers there. So I had a teacher at that school, and then when I transferred to Columbia, I had another teacher for a year because I had to take piano lessons there. And I respected these people because they were my professors in college, but I didn't really connect with them as teachers. The only teacher I really ever connected with was Mr. Hansen, and my first piano teacher, because she was my first teacher, and I learned about piano music first from her, so I had a connection to her. But it's the rest of them I didn't really connect with, and I was switching my focus to composition, and that happened in 2000. I made the decision shortly after. It was in 2001 I graduated high school, and then I went to college immediately after to the Bible college, and realized after the spell was broken of this crazy religious stuff I was involved in. Funnily enough, that happened at Bible college, because there was actually some very learned and very, properly educated people that were lecturing there that were not crazy, that maybe had weird religious beliefs, I guess, if you could call them that, but they were sober about them. They weren't insane. and so it kind of broke this spell that I had, and I thought I had all this stuff wrong with my left hand. So I said, in like 2002, it took me maybe a year of that for the spell to start to wear off, and then I said, I'm going to be a composer. I'm switching this all up. I'm done. And I went to Columbia, and I had a teacher for a year there. So that was 2003 was my first year at Columbia, and then I was done taking lessons after that. I haven't taken lessons since. So all said and done, I only took piano lessons about, let's see, 7 years. 7 years all in all. Mm-hmm.
Damn. I've known you for 10.
1996 was my first piano lesson. And then I had my last piano lesson sometime in late 2003, because I had, in the winter of 2004, I had to do a piano recital. So I guess I took a few lessons during that winter of 2004, but it was a small handful. And then I had a senior recital, and then school's over and I never took lessons again. I took private composition lessons after that, where I was in-depth studying pieces and writing and doing those things, but that was it. So that's my journey. That's where I started. It was not, what a lot of people expect, but.
Well, I think that you were put on this earth to do music, because every facet of your life, every facet of my life now, really revolves around music or creating in that way. You're a very artistic person. You do art. And, you're constantly creating things. As I said in the early beginnings of this episode, you're definitely a muse to me. And I think that comes from a place where you're perfectionist. So when you see an idea, you see it like, if I give you a bare bones idea, you go, okay, well, what does that idea look like amped up to 11? What does that accomplish amped up to 11? And you push me, and I think that's why you're such a good teacher and a real student of the game, because you're never happy saying you're the best at anything. Ever since I met you, you're not, in your eyes, you're not that good of a piano player, and you could always get better. In my eyes, you're the greatest piano player that's ever lived, who just keeps getting better, and I'm just like, how? How do you do that? Like, you can't get any better, and then you just keep getting better. So for me to see you grow, I mean, we don't really need to dive into the story too much, but when I met you nearly 10 years, I mean, just over 10 years ago, you weren't playing piano. I mean, you had, that was a different point in your life where you had taken a break from that journey.
Taking a break or giving up. It was one of the two.
And, well, it was life putting a pause
it got
on
rough
your
there
piano
for a minute.
playing. And I saw you, though. And I saw this musician, and I saw you out-music me on every level. You knew every fucking minute detail and things I couldn't even begin to pretend to understand. And you could talk circles around me. Literally, you talked circles around me at times when it came to music. And I'm so glad that moment 10 years ago, where you're showing me the circle of fifths, led us here. It led us here, And I think that's not something to just brush off, like a meeting at your old apartment, hearing one of your compositions, and I knew there was something extraordinarily special about you as a person. And I'm so lucky that I've been able to spend the last 10 years of my life with you. I'm grateful that you were my first guest on the Voice of Survival podcast. Was there anything you would like to say to anybody? Anything else you want to get out there before we get out of here?
I don't think so. I mean, I've covered a lot of bases. I haven't covered everything that's happened to me, but it's for another day, I guess. I don't.
We can save it for another podcast unless you don't think you're coming
I guess
back.
That's up to you, Mr. Host.
No, you're coming back on my show, but I don't know how much I'm going to be able to pressure you into actually doing it. So
it was good to talk on the thing today. It was good.
Cool. Well, I'm glad to have caught Miss Elusive Podcastress, the producer of the Journey into Comics podcast.
Oh, I will say this: play the new Zelda. As a side note, I know we're not talking whatever Game Addicts or any of those things. We can talk video games another day. Maybe one day I can get on with Brandon and we can talk about some things.
I'm sure
world of
Brandon
video
would set
games
that
up
up, no
there.
question. Because you guys could do a whole special.
That would be
on
radical.
video game
I do have a fun history with that. That's fun.
Because
yeah,
you have some really cool stories there too that we could, and that's the crazy thing, Sarah. That's what when I was discussing who do I bring for my first guest. It always had to be you, because in the 10 years I've known you, and in the 10 years I've learned about your journey through life and been a part of that journey. You just have so many cool experiences. Not to say that every experience is cool, but some of your experiences in your life are amazing, and I'm excited that this has been an outlet for you to get some of that out there. Like I said, I'm sure Brando and Mike would love to have you sometime. Just got to set that up with those guys. But if that's all for today, and I think that's how we're going to kind of close the show today. Sarah, I wanted to thank you so much, seriously, for coming on. I can't appreciate it. And thank you for pushing me to podcast, because look at where we are.
Well, I just try to make the people around me better. I try to, I don't know, you just try to help people.
Yeah, you're a very generous person, and I've always appreciated all the love and compassion you've been able to show me in our time together. But folks, as always, this is the Voice of Survival podcast. You can check us out on all of our different social media sites. On Facebook at the Voice of Survival podcast. On Facebook, my personal page is just the Voice of Survival. Also, you can go on to Instagram, Voice of Survival. At some point, I'm probably going to set up an Instagram. Did I just say that? I meant to say Twitter. You can go on Twitter at Voice of Survival. At some point, I'm going to be setting up an Instagram where we're going to be, really just talking about this show. And I'm so excited for the future of the Journey into Comics Network. In future past tense, when this is recording, the network has just released. So I'm excited to see where that goes. As always, folks, make sure you're checking out the Journey into Comics Network at journeyintocomics.com. The only place for everything nerd. Going to have some new shows coming up there soon. If that's going to do it, again, Sarah, thank you so much for being on. I'm
Sarah.
Nate, and this is the Voice of Survival podcast.